One went down under my wheels with a sickening thump. I didn't stop, just kept backing until I reached the main road, then shifted into drive and accelerated into the gathering darkness. My hands shook on the steering wheel as adrenaline ebbed, leaving cold clarity in its wake. I was alive. I had transportation. I had to make decisions now that would determine whether I stayed alive. Going home to my empty apartment seemed pointless. I needed information, needed to find other survivors, needed to understand the scope of what was happening. The post office? Police station? Both would likely be overrun by now. I turned toward town, headlights cutting through the misty darkness, revealing an abandoned sedan in a ditch, driver's door hanging open. Bad sign. My radio crackled to life unexpectedly. Someone had restored emergency broadcasting. I increased the volume. Repeat, National Guard has established secure zones at Oak Ridge High School and Memorial Hospital West Campus. All uninfected citizens should proceed to these locations for evacuation. Military checkpoints have been established at the following intersections. The high school was closer, about 4 miles along Riverdale Drive. I turned at the next intersection, mind racing. If they were evacuating, this was worse than even the news sites had indicated. How far had it spread? The county? The state? Further? The road ahead was dotted with abandoned vehicles, forcing me to slalom between them. Many showed signs of accidents or violence: shattered windows, blood-stained upholstery, doors left hanging open as occupants fled. The emptiness was eerie, punctuated only by the occasional shadowy figure stumbling through the beam of my headlights. I approached downtown Oak Ridge from the south, intending to cut across Main Street toward the high school. What I saw made me brake hard. Main Street was burning. Multiple buildings were engulfed in flames, casting a hellish glow over the scene. Dozens, no hundreds, of infected wandered aimlessly through the firelit streets. Some were on fire themselves, clothes burning as they walked, apparently insensible to pain. Police cruisers formed a makeshift barricade at the intersection, but no officers were visible. Impossible to pass through. I'd have to go around, taking residential streets to bypass downtown entirely. I backed up carefully, headlights off now to avoid drawing attention. The truck's white Postal Service paint job stood out enough as it was. I turned down Maple Avenue, a tree-lined residential street I delivered to every Tuesday. The contrast with my morning route was devastating. Homes where I'd delivered letters and packages for years now stood dark. Doors broken open, possessions scattered across once pristine lawns. A tricycle lay overturned in one driveway, abandoned. A garden hose still sprayed water in lazy arcs across another yard, no one having turned it off when the emergency began. I recognized the Tompkins house ahead. Jim Tompkins coached Little League and always offered me lemonade on hot days. His garage door was open, interior light still burning, powered by what must be a generator. Something moved in the shadows there. I slowed, squinting through the windshield. A human figure bent over something on the garage floor. Not infected. The movements were too precise, too purposeful. A survivor. I hesitated. Should I stop? Offer help? But what if they were armed, panicked, ready to shoot first and ask questions later? Before I could decide, the figure straightened and stepped into the light. Jim Tompkins, covered in blood, a shotgun cradled in his arms. He spotted my truck and raised a hand in greeting, recognizing the postal vehicle. I pulled into his driveway, keeping the engine running just in case. Jim approached cautiously, checking the darkness behind me before stepping to my window. "Frank, that you?" His voice was hoarse, as if he'd been screaming or crying. "Yeah, it's me." I rolled the window down just a few inches. "What's happening, Jim?" "I've been stuck out on the Henderson place all afternoon." His laugh held no humor. "End of the world, that's what. Started at the hospital. My sister worked there, called me this morning saying patients were attacking staff. By noon, downtown was overrun." He glanced over his shoulder nervously. "You heading to the evacuation point?" "Trying to. Downtown's blocked. Take Orchard Road to the bypass. Military's got it secured for now." He hesitated. "You seen my boy? Tommy, 16, letter jacket. He was at practice when this started. My heart sank. No, I'm sorry. Haven't seen anyone until you. Jim nodded, absorbing this. If you do, tell him his dad's looking for him. I'm heading to the high school after I check a few more places. Will do. I gestured at his shotgun. You got any extra weapons? All I've got is a curtain rod and a letter opener. He disappeared into his garage, returning with a tire iron. Better than nothing. Aim for the head. Only thing that stops them. He lowered his voice. They're not fast, but they don't get tired. And they hunt by sound more than sight. I think. Keep quiet when you can. I thanked him and was about to leave when he added, Frank, Oak Ridge isn't the only place. Before the TV went out, they were showing footage from Philadelphia, New York, Boston. It's everywhere, man. The implications chilled me. Not a local outbreak, not something contained to our county or even state. Something much bigger. I followed Jim's directions, navigating through once familiar neighborhoods now transformed into shadowy danger zones. Twice I had to stop while groups of infected shambled across the road, drawn by some noise in the distance. Once I barely avoided a massive pileup where a gasoline tanker had jackknifed across the bypass, forcing me onto surface streets again. The high school appeared ahead, its athletic field floodlights blazing, powered by rumbling generators. Military vehicles surrounded the perimeter, Humvees, transport trucks, even what looked like an armored personnel carrier. Soldiers in tactical gear checked vehicles at a checkpoint 50 yards from the main entrance. Relief flooded through me. Civilization still existed. The authorities were responding. Maybe this could be contained after all. I pulled into the line of vehicles approaching the checkpoint, fewer than I'd expected. Perhaps 15 cars, many packed with multiple people. Armed soldiers directed each vehicle forward in turn, checking occupants before allowing them through. As I inched closer, I could see into the school grounds beyond the fence. Hundreds of people milled about, many receiving medical attention. Military transports arrived and departed with clockwork regularity, evacuating groups to some unknown location. Efficiency amid chaos. The checkpoint was 5 cars ahead when I noticed something troubling. An argument had broken out between soldiers and the occupants of a minivan. A woman was screaming, being physically restrained as soldiers dragged someone from the back seat. A teenage boy, his movements sluggish, sweat gleaming on his pale face despite the cold. One soldier aimed a handheld device at the boy's forehead, an infrared thermometer. Whatever reading he got caused immediate action. The boy was separated from his family, taken behind a screening barrier as his mother fought hysterically against the soldiers holding her. I understood with sick clarity. They were checking for fevers, early signs of infection. 3 cars ahead now. I watched as a man was pulled from his vehicle, protesting violently that he'd just got overheated waiting. The thermometer told a different story. The soldiers were professional but unyielding, escorting him to the same screening area. 2 cars. The soldiers were thorough, checking every vehicle occupant, examining arms and legs for concealed bite wounds. One family was split apart when a little girl, no more than 6, was found with a bite mark on her calf. Her mother went with her willingly, sobbing as she was separated from her husband and older son. 1 car. I could see the screening area clearly now. Medical personnel in hazmat suits examined the suspected infected. Those cleared were reunited with their families, directed to a different entrance. Those who failed were taken to a fenced area further back, already containing perhaps 30 people in various stages of deterioration. Armed guards stood at each corner. They were being contained but not treated. There was no treatment. My turn. A soldier approached, rifle held at port arms, expression professionally blank behind his face shield. Step out of the vehicle. Sir? I complied, legs shaky from hours of tension and adrenaline. Any bites or scratches? Any contact with infected bodily fluids? I thought of Mrs. Henderson's blood mixing with rain and mud beneath me. The spatter when I'd driven the curtain rod through the paramedic's eye. No bites or scratches, I answered carefully, not quite lying. The thermometer pointed at my forehead. The soldier checked the reading, then signaled to his colleague. Clear. Area C for processing. Relief made me lightheaded. I was about to ask about evacuation when a commotion erupted behind the screening barrier. Shouting, then a single gunshot. The soldiers around me tensed but maintained positions. "What happens to the infected?" I asked as I was directed toward the processing area. The soldier didn't meet my eyes. "Medical evaluation." His tone suggested the conversation was over. I looked back at the fenced area with its deteriorating occupants. No medical treatment happening there. Only containment. Only waiting for the inevitable. The processing area was a converted gymnasium. Hundreds of people sat on bleachers or huddled in groups on the basketball court. Red Cross volunteers distributed water and blankets. Military personnel moved purposefully through the crowds, maintaining order. A large digital screen displayed evacuation group numbers and departure times. I found an empty space on the bleachers, still struggling to process everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, I'd been delivering mail, complaining about an extended route and rain. Now, I was a refugee, covered in other people's blood, having killed 3 people who weren't exactly people anymore. A voice over the loudspeaker announced, "Evacuation groups 1 through 5, prepare for departure. Military transport will proceed to Harrisburg Secure Zone. Bring only authorized personal items." The crowd stirred. People gathered belongings, children, moving toward the exits with the numb compliance of the shell-shocked. I watched, wondering what group I'd be assigned to, where we'd be taken, what would be left of our world when we got there. As darkness fell completely outside, the gymnasium lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. A reminder of how fragile our infrastructure had become in just 12 hours. What would it be like in 24? In a week? A child cried nearby, quickly hushed by an exhausted mother. An elderly man stared at nothing, lips moving in silent prayer. A teenage girl typed furiously on her phone, desperately trying to connect with someone, anyone, through networks that were probably already collapsing. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. The faces of the infected flashed behind my eyelids. Mrs. Henderson, the paramedic, the wandering figures on Main Street. All had been people with lives, families, futures. Now they were something else. The loudspeaker crackled again. "Attention all evacuees. Remain calm and in your designated areas. Medical personnel are conducting additional screening measures. Cooperation is mandatory." I opened my eyes to see soldiers and medical staff in hazmat suits entering the gymnasium, moving systematically through the crowds with thermometers and flashlights, checking for fevers, checking for bites that might have been concealed. Near the far entrance, someone tried to run. Soldiers converged instantly. A woman screamed as her husband was restrained, his sleeve torn away to reveal a mottled bite wound he'd somehow hidden through initial screening. The crowd rippled with tension as he was dragged away, still insisting he felt fine, he wasn't sick. Please don't separate him from his family. His wife collapsed, held back by other evacuees as she tried to follow. The medical team moved closer to my section. I remained still, focus narrowing to the blood dried on my uniform. Under my fingernails, probably in my hair. Would they check that closely? Would they care about possible exposure if I showed no symptoms? Looking toward the exit, I calculated my chances of slipping away unnoticed. Slim to none with so many armed personnel. And where would I go? Back into the infected streets? The high school, for all its clinical efficiency and moral compromises, represented the best chance for survival. Unless the infection had already taken hold inside me, multiplying silently with every heartbeat. I touched my forehead. Did it feel warm? Hard to tell after everything that had happened. The shakes that periodically ran through me, stress or early fever, the headache building behind my eyes, trauma or symptom. The medical team was one section away now. A teenage boy was escorted out, crying that he'd told them about his cut. It wasn't a bite, please. It was just from climbing a fence. His mother followed, arguing desperately with the hazmat-suited figures. The gymnasium doors closed behind them, muffling her pleas. My turn soon. They'd examine me, and I'd either pass or fail. A binary outcome determining whether I'd be evacuated to safety or quarantined with the infected to await the inevitable. 12 hours ago, I was just a mail carrier, walking familiar streets, greeting familiar faces. Now I was waiting to learn if I was still human or already becoming something else. The rain had finally stopped outside. I could see stars through the high gymnasium windows, indifferent to the collapse of our world below. The medical team approached my room, methodical and thorough. Ready or not, it was time to find out what came next. Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time. Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comments section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I never thought I'd be writing this down, but maybe someone needs to know what happened here. My name is Finn Callister, and still am, I guess, a senior operations technician at Raven Ridge Hydroelectric Facility, buried deep in the Cascade Mountains. You've probably never heard of us. No one ever thinks about where their electricity comes from until it stops flowing. That morning started like any other Tuesday on the graveyard shift. I'd been at Raven Ridge for 11 years, the last 5 spent mostly on night rotation. Some guys hated the isolation, but I found peace in it. Just me, the steady hum of the turbines, and the occasional maintenance check. The facility was a marvel of engineering that most people didn't even know existed, powering 3 counties while remaining practically invisible. I was in the main control room around 5:30 a.m., logging the overnight operations and preparing for shift change, when the first call came in. Ronan, my supervisor, voice tense in a way I'd never heard before. "Finn, you seeing anything unusual in the power consumption metrics?" I glanced at the monitors. The readouts showed significant fluctuations across all grids, spikes and drops that made no sense for that time of morning. "Yeah, actually. Grid 3 just dropped 30%, but 1 and 4 are pulling overtime. What's going on?" "Turn on the news. Any channel." I switched on the small TV we kept in the corner of the control room for weather updates. Every channel showed the same images: streets filled with people running, emergency vehicles with lights flashing, reporters looking panicked. The crawler at the bottom mentioned widespread disturbances and unexplained violent incidents. "Jesus," I muttered. "Riots?" "That's what they're calling it," Donovan replied. "But I've got a buddy in emergency services in Auburn. Says it's something else. People attacking each other, acting wrong. Department's calling it a public health emergency now." I watched the footage more carefully, noticing how strangely some people moved, staggering, lunging at others. One news helicopter shot showed police firing into a crowd, which didn't disperse but continued advancing. "Look, I need you to stay put," Donovan continued. "Corporates requesting all essential personnel maintain positions. Keep the turbines running. Stabilize the grid where you can. Power's going to be critical for emergency services." "What about the day shift?" "Patching them through to other stations. Better to minimize movement right now." He paused. "This might get worse before it gets better." That was the understatement of the century. By 8 a.m., the news broadcasts started cutting out. One by one, stations went to emergency broadcast signals, or simply to static. The power fluctuations grew more severe. Auburn went completely dark first, followed by sections of Tacoma. Seattle was experiencing rolling blackouts despite our best efforts to stabilize the flow. I kept the turbines running, rerouting power as needed, following emergency protocols we'd drilled but never expected to use. All the while, my phone buzzed with increasingly desperate texts from friends and family. From my sister Thalia, "Are you seeing this? People are going crazy. Wade was bitten by our neighbor. He's really sick, not answering calls now." From my friend Dante, Highways jammed. Everyone's trying to leave the city. Some guy just attacked a family at the gas station, tore at them with his teeth. This isn't normal, Finn. I tried calling them back, but cellular networks were becoming overwhelmed. By 9 a.m., I couldn't get through to anyone. The facility intercom crackled. It was Luther from the dam monitoring station. "Callister, you need to see this." I made my way from the control room to the observation deck overlooking the reservoir. Luther stood at the window, binoculars raised. "Look," he said, handing them to me and pointing southwest toward Auburn. Through the lenses, I could see smoke rising from multiple locations. The city that normally spread out in neat grids looked chaotic, with flashing emergency lights concentrated in several areas. Even from 20 miles away, the situation looked dire. "Been watching for about an hour," Luther said. 3 separate fires have broken out. No one seems to be containing them." "What about the others?" I asked, referring to the 4 other technicians who should have been on site. Cade and Ash tried to leave after the first reports. Both have families in Tacoma. Haven't heard from them since. Ezra's in the auxiliary control room, trying to raise someone at the Central Grid Authority. Cassia's securing the access road gate. A new message appeared on my phone. This one, an official government emergency alert. "Remain indoors. Avoid contact with affected individuals. Do not approach anyone displaying aggressive or erratic behavior. Await further instructions." I showed it to Luther, whose face had gone pale. "My wife and kids are in Auburn," he said quietly. I put a hand on his shoulder, not knowing what to say. The radio at his belt squawked, Cassia's voice coming through. "Vehicle approaching the access road. Unmarked van, moving fast." We hurried down to join her at the main gate, a reinforced security checkpoint about half a mile from the facility proper. The van had crashed violently into a tree near the gate, and a man in a blood-stained police uniform was approaching on foot. "Officer," Cassia called out as we arrived, "this is a restricted area." The man kept coming, moving with an odd, staggering gait. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, revealing a massive wound that looked like something had taken a bite out of him. His eyes. Something was wrong with his eyes, vacant yet somehow focused on us with terrible hunger. "Sir, stop where you are!" Cassia raised her hand, but the officer kept coming, his mouth opening in a guttural moan that raised the hair on my neck. That's when I noticed the van's side door was open. Inside, I could see more figures moving. A hand reached out, gray-skinned, fingers curled like claws. "Cassia, get back." I pulled her away from the fence just as the officer lunged forward, gripping the chain link with bloodied hands, face pressing against the metal as he tried to reach us. More figures emerged from the crashed van, all moving with that same wrong, hungry stagger. "What the hell is wrong with them?" Luther whispered. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was impossible. Something from fiction coming to life before our eyes. But there was no denying what we were witnessing. These people were dead, yet still moving, driven by some primal hunger. "We need to lock down the facility," I said, backing away. "Now." We retreated to the main complex, securing every entrance. Ezra met us in the control room, his face ashen. "Just got through to emergency management in Olympia," he said. "It's happening everywhere. They're calling it an infection." Come back." "Jesus Christ," Cassia whispered. "What are we supposed to do?" Luther asked. "They told us to keep the power running, but the military is establishing safe zones," Ezra continued. "They need power for field hospitals, command centers. We keep the lights on as long as we can." I looked at the monitors. More sections of the grid were failing as substations went offline. The cities we were powering were literally falling apart. "I need to find my family," Luther said suddenly, grabbing his keys. "They're out there." None of us tried to stop him. We understood. Cassia decided to go with him. Her apartment in Tacoma was on the way to Auburn. They took the facility's emergency truck, loaded with what supplies we could spare. "We'll send help if we can," Cassia promised as they left. "Hang tight." That left just Ezra and me at a facility designed to be run by a minimum crew of 6. We divided the responsibilities. He would handle the power routing and communications. I would manage the turbines and security. By noon, we lost contact with the outside world entirely. The radio picked up nothing but static. Emergency broadcasts had stopped. Our phones showed no service. The only signs of the ongoing catastrophe were the distant plumes of smoke rising from the cities below, and the occasional helicopter flying overhead, too high to signal. Ezra and I worked in silence, doing our jobs out of duty and training, though a growing part of me wondered if it even mattered anymore. Were there still functioning hospitals that needed our power, command centers directing rescue operations, or were we powering empty buildings while the streets filled with the infected? At 3 p.m., I was checking the perimeter cameras when I noticed something in the spillway below the dam. At first, I thought it was debris, branches, or trash caught in the current. Then I realized what I was seeing. Bodies, dozens of them, washing down from upstream, tumbling lifelessly in the churning water. Some wore civilian clothes, others uniforms. All showed signs of violence, missing limbs, massive wounds. The city's dead were coming to us now, carried by the current. I didn't tell Ezra. He was still working, still believing we were helping somehow. Let him have that for a little longer. As dusk approached, I stood on the observation deck and watched Auburn burn in the distance. Fires had spread unchecked throughout the day. Occasionally I heard distant explosions, gas mains maybe, or desperate last stands. The facility felt enormous with just the two of us. Our footsteps echoed in empty corridors as we made our rounds. The constant hum of the turbines, once comforting, now felt like a requiem for a world that was rapidly disappearing. "I'm going to check the lower intake," I told Ezra around 6 p.m. "Make sure nothing's blocking the screens." The intake area was where water entered the turbine system, protected by massive mesh screens that prevented debris from damaging the equipment. I'd seen enough bodies in the spillway to worry about blockage. The access corridor to the intake was long and dimly lit, a narrow concrete tunnel ending at a heavy maintenance door. As I approached, I heard something that stopped me cold, a wet scraping sound from the other side of the door. Something was moving in the intake chamber. I hesitated, then carefully opened the door a crack. The smell hit me first, rotten river water and something worse. In the dim emergency lighting, I could make out a figure hunched over by the water. One of the bodies had washed in through the intake, but it wasn't a body anymore. It was moving. The figure heard the door and turned toward me. It had been a woman once. Now her skin was bloated and gray from hours in the water, one arm bent at an impossible angle. But her eyes, those terrible, milky eyes, fixed on me with hungry recognition. She lurched to her feet, water cascading from her soaked clothing, and staggered toward me with outstretched arms. I slammed the door shut and locked it, heart pounding. Through the small window, I watched her throw herself against the metal, fingernails scraping frantically, mouth opening and closing in silent hunger. They can get in through the intake, I realized aloud. If one had made it through, others could follow. Our secure facility suddenly felt much less secure. I ran back to find Ezra to warn him, but the control room was empty. His coffee cup sat on the console, still warm. "Ezra," I called out, checking the adjacent rooms. Nothing. That's when I heard the scream. The scream came from the maintenance level. I grabbed a wrench from the toolbox and ran toward the stairwell. The maintenance level was a maze of corridors cast in emergency lighting's red glow. The scream had stopped, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound. "Ezra," I called out, "where are you?" A crash came from the generator room. I approached slowly, wrench raised. Through the open door, I saw Ezra on the floor, throat torn open, blood pooling beneath him. Luther stood over him, face covered in blood, eyes vacant and hungry. "Luther," my voice cracked, "what happened to you?" He turned toward me, any recognition overwhelmed by hunger. His mouth opened, teeth stained crimson, and he lunged. I swung the wrench, connecting with his temple. He staggered but didn't fall. I swung again, catching him under the jaw. He crumpled, momentarily stunned. "Finn," Ezra gasped. "He just appeared, said he saw his family." I knelt beside him, pressing my hand to his throat wound. It was futile. "Run," Ezra managed. "More coming." Luther stirred, beginning to rise despite the devastating blows. I backed toward the door as Ezra's breathing stopped. I slammed it shut, jammed the wrench through the handle, and ran for the control room. The security cameras showed the gate at the access road open, the emergency truck abandoned nearby. Cassia roamed the turbine hall with that same predatory gait as Luther, 3 more infected following her. I barricaded myself in the control room with food and makeshift weapons. Night fell as I watched Auburn burn in the distance. Around midnight, vehicle headlights appeared on the access road. 3 military Humvees and 2 civilian trucks approached, soldiers methodically clearing infected from their path. I used the speaker system. "I'm in the control room. The facility is compromised." When they reached me, their leader introduced himself. "Lieutenant Jace Rourke, Washington National Guard. You're the only survivor?" "Yes, there were 6 of us this morning." "Auburn's gone," he said grimly. "Tacoma, too. The infection spread faster than containment efforts could handle." "What about Seattle, Olympia?" "Partial containment in Seattle. Olympia's government has relocated to emergency bunkers." 3 civilians in plain clothes joined us. "Dr. Mercer, Department of Energy," the oldest introduced himself. "These are my colleagues, Treadwell and Foster." Mercer spread a map across the console. "The infection has claimed most of Auburn and surrounding areas. It's spreading faster than we can contain it." "What are you proposing?" I asked, though I already suspected. "We need to stop them completely," Mercer said. "The dam. It's the only way." I stared at him. "You want to breach the dam? Flood the entire valley?" "Not just flood it," Treadwell interjected. "Well, we need to destroy it, completely." "You're talking about wiping out everything downstream," I said. "That's dozens of square miles." "Area's already lost," Rourke countered. "We're broadcasting evacuation orders. Anyone still alive has 2 hours to reach higher ground." 2 hours? That's not enough time. "It's all we have," Mercer cut in. "The infection is spreading exponentially. By morning, it will reach the evacuation zones in the highlands. Our models predict complete regional infection within 24 hours. You're talking about destroying infrastructure that took years to build, that powers 3 counties," I protested. "We're talking about saving what's left of humanity in this region," Rourke said quietly. "Sometimes the hardest choice is the only choice." I looked at the monitors showing infected wandering through my facility. The city I'd powered for years was burning, its people either dead or transformed into monsters. "What do you need from me?" I finally asked. "Structural weak points," Mercer replied. "Where to place charges for maximum effect with minimum explosives." I pulled up the facility's blueprint on the main screen. "These are the primary support columns. The main spillway controls are here. If you target these points simultaneously, the pressure of the reservoir will do the rest." "How long to set the charges?" Rourke asked Treadwell. 90 minutes if we split into teams," he replied. "Make it 60, Rourke ordered. "We're on borrowed time." Soldiers moved through the facility, placing explosive charges at my designated locations. I stayed in the control room, manually overriding safety protocols to increase water pressure behind critical junctures. "We need to broadcast a final warning," I said. Rourke nodded. I activated the emergency system. This is Finn Callister at Raven Ridge Hydroelectric. In 60 minutes, the dam will be breached. If you are anywhere in the Auburn Valley or lower elevations, evacuate immediately to higher ground. This is not a drill. On the monitors, we could see some movement. Vehicles racing uphill, small groups climbing toward safety. But we also saw thousands of infected, oblivious to their coming destruction. Charges set, Treadwell reported at the 55-minute mark. Remote detonators synchronized. Suddenly alarms blared. Security monitors showed infected pouring into the facility from multiple points. "They've breached the east entrance," a soldier shouted through the radio. "Dozens of them." "Fall back to the control room," Rourke ordered. "Prepare for emergency extraction." Gunfire erupted throughout the facility as soldiers fought their way back. Not everyone made it. Through the cameras, I watched men being overwhelmed, torn apart by the infected. "We need to go now," Mercer urged. "If they reach the charges, what about the timer?" I asked. "We'll have to trigger it manually," Treadwell said grimly. "From a safe distance." We evacuated through the north maintenance exit, fighting infected at every turn. The rooftop helipad was our rally point, a Black Hawk waiting with rotors spinning. As we lifted off, I looked down at the facility that had been my home for 11 years. Infected swarmed through every entrance, flooding the corridors like a virus through a bloodstream. "Distance?" Rourke asked the pilot. "Safe range in 30 seconds. Treadwell held the detonator, thumb hovering over the trigger. "On your command." We reached the safe distance, hovering above a ridge that gave us clear view of the dam and valley below. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting the first golden light on what remained of civilization. "Think about what we're doing," I said. "There could still be survivors down there. And how many more will die if we wait?" Mercer countered. Rourke looked at me. "Your call, Callister. You know this place better than anyone." I thought about Ezra, about Luther and Cassia, about my sister Thalia and friend Dante. Were they already gone? Or were they out there somewhere desperately trying to survive? In the end, it wasn't really a choice, just the least terrible option in a world of horrors. I nodded. "Now," Rourke ordered. Treadwell pressed the trigger. The charges detonated in sequence, targeting the dam's critical points. For 3 seconds, the massive structure held against physics and water pressure. Then a web of cracks raced across the concrete face, and with a deep groan, the central section collapsed inward. Water burst through the gap, carrying chunks of the structure. The remaining sections toppled like dominoes, unable to withstand the sudden shift in pressure. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a roar so deep it vibrated in my chest. "My God," someone whispered. From our helicopter, the devastation unfolded with terrible clarity. A 30-foot wall of water moved at highway speed, carrying debris and uprooted trees. Everything in its path vanished in seconds. Auburn disappeared beneath the deluge in minutes. Buildings crumpled, vehicles tumbled like toys. The infected were swept away without distinction, their mindless hunger no match for the flood's raw power. The valley filled rapidly, water rebounding off hillsides and creating chaotic currents. Only the tallest buildings remained partially visible, islands in a new sea. Fires bloomed where gas lines ruptured, creating surreal rivers of flame across the water's surface. "There," Rourke pointed to a distant hillside. "Survivors." Through binoculars, I could make out people gathered on high ground, waving at our helicopter. The pilot noted their positions for rescue teams. "Did we do the right thing?" I asked Rourke. "We did the necessary thing," he replied, eyes fixed on the destruction below. The water had transformed the entire valley into an inland sea, with isolated buildings and hilltops forming a strange archipelago. Most striking was the absence of the infected. The flood had accomplished in minutes what might have taken months of military operations. As we approached Paradise Lodge, I saw it had been transformed into a military installation overnight. Barricades, command tents, and landing zones covered what had once been parking lots and meadows. The military camp bustled with activity, soldiers and civilians building defenses, treating wounded, distributing supplies. Operations centers had been established in the lodge with communication arrays on the roof, maintaining contact with other survivor outposts. On screens throughout the command center, satellite imagery showed the flood's progression. The entire valley had become a lake, stretching for miles in every direction. Helicopters departed on rescue missions to retrieve stranded survivors. Medical teams triaged the injured, separating the bitten from those with conventional wounds. Armed guards watched the perimeter, alert for any infected that might have escaped the flood. A large display showed the strategic situation. The flood had effectively cut the region in half, creating a natural barrier. Military units were securing the few remaining bridges and crossing points. "The water's becoming our ally," Rourke explained. "It's channeling the infected into predictable paths." "What about the people who didn't make it to high ground?" I asked. His silence was answer enough. I helped where I could, using my technical knowledge to assist with power systems. The work kept my hands busy, while my mind grappled with what we'd done. Each time I looked at the distant water, I thought of thousands who hadn't survived, both infected and those who hadn't escaped in time. That evening, Rourke found me staring out at the transformed landscape, now orange in the setting sun. "The water's creating a natural barrier," he said. "Infection can't spread across it easily." "How many died in the flood?" I asked directly. "How many would have died if we'd done nothing?" The infection was spreading exponentially. By our models, the entire region would have been lost within days. Through binoculars, I watched a helicopter hovering above a church steeple protruding from the flood, rescuing people from the bell tower. "Your technical knowledge saved lives today," Rourke continued. "We need people like you, people who understand infrastructure." "Used as weapons, you mean?" "As tools," he corrected. "Tools for survival." He pointed to a map. "These dams here create similar strategic opportunities. These power stations could be modified for defense. Water treatment facilities will be critical for long-term survival." I understood what he was asking. My expertise would be needed again. "I'll go wherever I'm needed," I said. He nodded. "Get some rest, we move out at dawn." That night, as I lay on my assigned cot, I could see the floodwaters glittering under moonlight, stretching to the horizon. I thought about Ezra, Luther, Cassia, Thalia, and Dante. Were they already gone, or had some found safety? I would probably never know. The weight of the day's decision pressed down on me. We had destroyed a marvel of engineering, wiped away communities, and altered the geography permanently. Yet it had given humanity a fighting chance. Through the window, I could see the lights of the military perimeter, small points of brightness pushing back against the darkness. It wasn't much, just a foothold really, but it was a start, and sometimes that's all you need. We'd done what we came to do. The infected were being swept away. The surviving population centers would have time to establish new containment zones. I began the shutdown sequence, carefully closing the spillway gates to prevent damage. As the water flow gradually decreased, the roar subsided, leaving only the sound of gunfire and the moans of the infected. 2 minutes to complete shutdown, I announced. Rourke nodded, then spoke into his radio. "All units, prepare for immediate evacuation. Fall back to the vehicles in sequence. We leave in 5 minutes." "Sir," a soldier called from the doorway. "The main access road is overrun. We can't get to the Humvees." I thought quickly. "There's a maintenance road on the north side. It connects to a fire break that runs up the mountain. If your vehicles can handle off-road, it's your best option." Rourke studied the facility map, then nodded. "Redirect all units to the north exit. Prepare for overland evacuation." As soldiers rushed to comply, I finished the shutdown sequence. The spillway gates closed with a final mechanical groan, the water flow returning to normal operational levels. I ran a quick diagnostic. The facility was damaged but still functional. The turbines would continue generating power until something broke with no one to fix it. "Time to go," Rourke urged, gripping my shoulder. "Nothing more you can do here." I took one last look at the control room, the place I'd spent countless hours maintaining the systems that powered thousands of homes. Then I grabbed my pack and followed Rourke. The corridors were littered with the bodies of infected, taken down by the soldiers as they retreated. We moved quickly, following the evacuation route to the north exit. Ahead of us, soldiers were already loading into vehicles, covering each other as they fell back. We emerged onto a narrow service road just as the sun crested the eastern mountains, bathing everything in golden light. Below us, the valley was transformed. A vast lake now filled what had once been Auburn. Water flowed through streets and around buildings, washing away the infected. From our elevation, it looked almost peaceful. Did we do the right thing? I asked Rourke as we climbed into the last Humvee. He gazed out at the flooded valley. We did the necessary thing. Sometimes that's all you can hope for. As we drove away, following the rough mountain track, I looked back at Raven Ridge. The facility stood silent against the morning sky, water still flowing through its systems by the engineering principles that remained true, even as the world fell apart around them. In the Humvee, military radio chatter provided updates from other areas. Seattle's containment was holding. Evacuees were being processed at secure facilities in the mountains. The flood had bought them time to establish proper defenses, to regroup. Where to now? I asked Treadwell, who sat across from me. Mount Rainier National Park, he replied. The military's establishing a forward operating base at Paradise Lodge. High elevation, defensible approaches, good visibility. I nodded, thinking about what might come next. The infection had changed everything in less than 24 hours. Cities fallen, thousands dead or infected, civilization retreating to fortified enclaves. But people were fighting back. The flood had shown that we could still act decisively, still find ways to survive. As we wound up into the mountains, leaving the water-filled valley behind, I saw something that gave me hope. A military helicopter circling over a group of survivors on a hillside, dropping supplies. People waving, signaling, living. The flood hadn't just cleared the infected. It had created a natural barrier against their spread, at least temporarily. The military would have time to establish proper quarantine zones, to organize the survivors, perhaps even to begin researching the infection itself. Rourke caught me watching the helicopter. We're not done yet, Callister. Your experience with the dam's systems, that kind of technical knowledge is going to be vital. We've got other infrastructure that needs assessment, other facilities that might be used. Used as weapons, you mean? As tools, he corrected. Tools for survival. That's what this is now, a fight for survival. I thought about the decision we'd made, about the water washing away everything below. Had there been survivors caught in the flood? Almost certainly. But how many more would have been lost if the infection had continued to spread unchecked? The hard truth was that the world had changed. The old rules, the old morality, they belonged to a time before the infected. Now we had to make impossible choices, had to weigh lives against lives. The flood had been one such choice. There would be others. As Paradise Lodge came into view, a cluster of buildings now surrounded by military vehicles and hastily erected barricades, I saw people working together. Soldiers and civilians, military and medical personnel, all focused on a single purpose: survival. We pulled into the compound, joining the flow of activity. People unloading supplies, setting up communications equipment, treating the wounded. A semblance of organization amid the chaos. A medical team approached our vehicle, checking everyone for bites or scratches. Once cleared, we were directed to a briefing area where other technical specialists had gathered. Engineers, infrastructure experts, communications technicians, people with skills necessary for rebuilding. Dr. Mercer addressed the group. What we did at Raven Ridge was just the beginning. We've bought ourselves time, hours, maybe days. Now we need to capitalize on it, to secure what remains, to establish sustainable safe zones, to begin pushing back. As they outlined plans for reclaiming territory, for establishing defensive perimeters, for restoring critical systems, I found myself caught between grief for what we'd lost and determination to protect what remained. The hydroelectric plant had been my responsibility for 11 years. I'd kept the power flowing, maintained the systems, ensured everything ran smoothly. Now I had a new purpose: helping to create safe havens for survivors, using my technical knowledge to secure what was left of our world. Through the windows of the lodge, I could see the valley below. Smoke still rose from parts of the city that remained above water. The infection still ruled most of the territory. But here, in this high mountain outpost, humanity was regrouping, planning, preparing to fight back. The flood had been a desperate measure, a last resort that had cost lives but saved many more. As I joined the technical team studying maps and infrastructure diagrams, I realized that was the new reality. Difficult choices, terrible necessities, but also hope. The dim but persistent hope that we could reclaim what we'd lost. Outside, military helicopters continued to retrieve survivors from isolated locations. Radio communications brought reports of other secure zones being established. The flood had created a natural barrier that gave us breathing room. Time to organize a more coordinated response. Rourke approached me as the briefing ended. We're sending teams to secure other critical infrastructure. Power plants, water treatment facilities, communications centers. We need people who know how to keep them running. I'll go wherever I'm needed, I said. He nodded, satisfied. Get some rest. We move out at dawn. That night, as I lay on a cot in what had once been a tourist lodge, listening to the activity of the military camp around me, I thought about the choice we'd made at the dam. The water rushing down the valley, washing away the infected, and whoever else had been caught in its path. It would haunt me, I knew, but it had been necessary. Tomorrow we would begin the work of reclaiming what we could, of carving out safe spaces in a world suddenly filled with threats. It wouldn't be easy. The infected were everywhere, drawn to noise and movement, driven by insatiable hunger. But we had something they didn't: purpose, planning, the ability to adapt. I thought of the dam standing alone now, still generating power for cities that might never recover. A monument to what we'd built and what we'd lost, but also a reminder of what we could do when necessity demanded it. Outside my window, I could see the lights of the military perimeter, small points of brightness pushing back against the darkness. It wasn't much, just a foothold really, but it was a start, and sometimes that's all you need. Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time. Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comments section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. For 10 years, I was a ghost. Robberies, disappearances, names that weren't mine. I was smart, careful, always one step ahead. But eventually the feds caught up. I was number 7 on their most wanted list when they finally cornered me in a motel outside Phoenix. It was a Tuesday morning, hotter than hell. I'd made the mistake of staying an extra day to meet a contact. The desk clerk must have recognized me from the news. Next thing I knew, there were unmarked sedans and tactical units surrounding the place. "Maddox, farewell," a voice boomed through a megaphone. "FBI, we have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." I remember laughing at that. 10 years of working alone, of perfect plans and clean getaways, and they expected me to just walk out? There had to be at least 15 agents out there, all itching to be the one who brought in the infamous Maddox Reed. A name that wasn't even mine to begin with. I had 2 options: surrender or fight. The rational choice would have been to give up, lawyer up, and work out a deal. But rationality wasn't what got me this far. My first shot went through the window, shattering glass across the parking lot. Return fire came immediately, bullets tearing through the thin motel walls like they were made of paper. I rolled behind the bed, trying to control my breathing as plaster dust filled the air. A tactical error on my part. I should have mapped more exit routes, should have been more careful. But when you've outsmarted the law for a decade, you start to think you're invincible. I managed to make it to the bathroom window, tight fit, but my only chance. Halfway through, I felt it. A white-hot burn across my neck. A bullet had grazed me, slicing through skin and muscle, missing the artery by centimeters. Blood poured down my collar, warm and sticky. The fall from the window knocked the wind out of me. I staggered to my feet, vision blurring, only to find myself staring down the barrel of a standard-issue FBI pistol. "Don't move," the agent said. Young guy, probably his first big arrest. I could see the excitement in his eyes, mixed with caution. Hands where I can see them. Everything after that came in fragments. The cold bite of handcuffs, the rough push into a government vehicle, the triumphant voices of federal agents congratulating each other, and the steady drip of my blood onto the car's floor mat. They took me to some small county hospital, Saint something or other, rather than risk the drive to Phoenix with me bleeding out. Small town medicine. Just a single-story building with a cross on top. The kind of place that probably dealt with more rattlesnake bites than gunshot wounds. "He needs stitches before transport," I heard someone say. "Can't have him bleeding all over the place during processing." They cuffed me to a hospital bed in a small examination room. 2 agents stayed with me, the young one from before and an older guy with salt and pepper hair, who looked like he'd been chasing guys like me for decades. They positioned themselves by the door, weapons holstered but ready. A nurse came in, middle-aged, efficient-looking. She examined my neck wound with clinical detachment, not caring who I was or what I'd done. "Going to need about 10 stitches," she told no one in particular, "and antibiotics." As she cleaned the wound, I noticed something odd. The hospital seemed unusually busy. Raised voices in the corridor, hurried footsteps. A code announcement over the PA system that made the nurse pause, frowning. "That's the 3rd emergency in an hour," she muttered. "Must be a pileup on the highway." The younger FBI agent, Egon, according to his badge, shifted uncomfortably. "How much longer will this take?" 10 minutes, she replied, threading a needle. "Maybe 15. That's when we heard the first scream, high-pitched and abruptly cut short. The older agent straightened, hand moving to his weapon. "Check it out," he told Garcia. "I'll stay with the prisoner." Garcia nodded, slipping out into the corridor. The nurse continued working, but I could see tension in her movements now. "What's going on out there?" I asked. She shook her head. "No idea. We've had strange cases coming in all morning, bite wounds, fevers, aggressive behavior. Nothing in the news about—" The door burst open. Garcia stumbled back in, his face pale. "Walsh, we need to go. Now." "What is it?" the older agent, Walsh, demanded. "Something's happening. People are attacking each other in the ER. Biting. It's like they're rabid or something." The nurse dropped her suture needle. "That can't be right. I just saw Dr. Patel 20 minutes ago." "Well, I just saw him trying to tear out a paramedic's throat," Garcia replied, his voice rising. "We need to get the prisoner out of here." Walsh made a quick decision. "Finish the bandage," he told the nurse. "We're moving him." She hastily taped a bandage over my half-stitched wound. Through the thin hospital walls, I could hear the commotion growing. Crashes, shouts, what sounded like gurneys being overturned. And underneath it all, a strange guttural moaning that raised the hair on my arms. The agents uncuffed me from the bed but immediately secured my wrists in front of me. Walsh grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Try anything," he warned, "and I'll put a bullet in your leg. Clear?" I nodded. For once in my life, I wasn't thinking about escape. Something about those sounds from the hallway had my survival instinct screaming. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to face it alone. We stepped into the corridor, and the full scope of the chaos hit us. Medical staff were running in all directions. A doctor was trying to barricade a door with a crash cart. Blood, far too much blood, smeared the walls and floor in long, dragging streaks. "This way," Walsh directed, pulling me toward what I assumed was an exit. Garcia took point, weapon drawn now. We made it halfway down the corridor when a nurse burst through a door ahead of us, but something was wrong. Her scrubs were soaked with blood, her movements were spasmodic. Her head swiveled toward us and I saw her face. Eyes clouded white, skin gray, mouth snapped shut again and again. Blood and something darker dripped from her chin. "Jesus Christ," breathed Garcia. The nurse, or what used to be a nurse, locked onto us and charged, moving with horrifying speed. Garcia fired 2 shots. Center mass. She stumbled but kept coming. Walsh pushed me against the wall and drew his weapon, firing once, hitting her in the shoulder. Still she came. "The head!" I shouted, sudden understanding clicking into place. "Aim for the head!" Garcia's 3rd shot caught her in the forehead. She dropped instantly, body collapsing in a lifeless heap, finally still. Walsh turned to me, suspicious. "How did you know that would work?" "Everyone knows that's how you kill zombies," I said, the word feeling ridiculous in my mouth despite the evidence before us. "Haven't you seen any movies?" Before he could respond, 3 more figures rounded the corner. A doctor and 2 patients in hospital gowns, all moving erratic, twitching like it was fighting something inside its own body, all showing the same dead eyes and blood-smeared mouths. "Go," Walsh ordered. We ran, dodging abandoned equipment and overturned furniture. The hospital had become a maze of horror. Through open doors, I glimpsed scenes that would haunt me forever. A doctor being torn apart by his own patients, an elderly man cornered in a supply closet, a woman cradling a child, both of them showing the telltale gray pallor of infection. We burst through doors into what looked like a small cafeteria. Garcia slammed them shut behind us, dragging a vending machine to barricade the entrance. "We need to get to the car," Walsh said, breathing hard. "Call this in." "Phones are down," Garcia replied, checking his cell. "No signal." I noticed they'd loosened their grip on me in the confusion. They were distracted, panicking. It was the opportunity I'd been waiting for, though not one I'd ever expected. When the windows shattered and more infected poured in from outside, everything happened in a blur. Walsh shoved me toward an emergency exit while firing at the approaching horde. Garcia was quickly overwhelmed, screaming as teeth sank into his arm. In the chaos, I made my move. As Walsh fought off an infected orderly, I slammed my shoulder into him, knocking him off balance. He stumbled against a table, and I drove my cuffed hands down onto his wrist. His gun clattered to the floor, our eyes met for a split second. No words were needed. We both knew what was happening. I grabbed the weapon and took aim, not at him, but at the infected that was closing in behind him. The bullet caught it between the eyes. Walsh didn't hesitate. He pulled a key from his pocket and tossed it to me. "Get those cuffs off and run," he said. "I'm going back for Garcia." "He's already gone," I told him, unlocking the handcuffs. "And you will be too if you go back there." He hesitated, torn between duty and survival. That moment of indecision cost him everything. An infected patient, still trailing IV tubes, lunged through the broken window and sank teeth into Walsh's neck. His scream cut through me as blood fountained from the wound. I should have helped him. Maybe I could have. But 10 years of looking out for only myself doesn't change in an instant. I ran, Walsh's gun clutched in my hand, his dying scream echoing in my ears. Outside was no better than inside. The hospital parking lot had become a killing field. Overturned ambulances, medical staff fighting a losing battle against their former patients, civilians trying to flee only to be dragged down. I spotted a police cruiser, keys probably still in the ignition, 20 yards away. Might as well have been 20 miles. Between me and potential escape, at least a dozen infected stumbled about, their heads turning in unison at the sound of breaking glass from behind me. I took a deep breath, readied the gun, and ran. The first infected reached for me, a man with his throat torn open, arterial blood still pulsing weakly from the wound. I dodged under her grasp and kept moving. Another lunged, a paramedic missing half his face, and I had to fire. The sound drew more of them. 5 yards from the cruiser, I ran out of bullets. 3 infected blocked my path, advancing with limbs bending the wrong way. I ducked between parked cars, trying to circle around. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my wounded neck. The half-finished stitches pulling with every movement. A scream drew their attention. A woman trying to protect her child from approaching infected. The distraction gave me the opening I needed. I sprinted the final distance, yanked open the cruiser door, and threw myself inside. Keys in the ignition, just as I'd hoped. The engine roared to life and I reversed hard, crushing an infected between the cruiser and another vehicle. I didn't look back as I accelerated out of the parking lot, leaving behind the dying and the dead. On the road, reality started setting in. The world I knew was falling apart around me. Traffic signals didn't matter anymore. Neither did speed limits or lane markers. Cars had been abandoned haphazardly, some still running, doors hanging open. I had to swerve constantly to avoid collisions. I flipped on the police radio, hoping for information. Most channels were static, but occasionally voices broke through. Multiple outbreaks across the county. CDC advisory to shelter in place. National Guard deployment to major cities. Symptoms include fever, aggression, and... The last coherent broadcast I heard was a military commander ordering his units to establish quarantine zones. "Shoot to kill," he said. "Headshots only. The infected cannot be saved." I drove for hours, heading east on instinct alone. Small towns and rural areas flashed by, each showing signs of the growing apocalypse. Abandoned vehicles, buildings with broken windows, occasional groups of infected wandering aimlessly. I avoided the highways, sticking to back roads I'd memorized years ago when planning escape routes became second nature. By sunset, I'd put nearly 200 miles between me and that hospital. The cruiser was running low on gas, and I needed to find shelter before dark. The infected seemed more active at night, drawn to lights and movement. I pulled into an abandoned gas station, one of those mom-and-pop operations with a small convenience store attached. No electricity, but the tanks might still have fuel. As I approached, I scanned for movement. Nothing. The place had already been looted, judging by the broken front window and scattered merchandise. Inside, I found a few overlooked supplies: bottled water, stale protein bars, a first aid kit someone had dropped in their haste. Most importantly, I found ammunition that fit Walsh's gun, stored behind the counter. The owner had been prepared for trouble, just not this kind of trouble. As I rummaged through the store, a sudden realization hit me. No one was hunting me anymore. No FBI agents checking motels, no police scanning license plates, no facial recognition cameras tracking my movements. The law had died screaming, just like Walsh in that cafeteria. I was free. I laughed then, a hollow sound in the empty store. 10 years running, and all it took was the end of the world to give me my freedom. The irony wasn't lost on me. As night fell, I barricaded myself in the store's small office, a candle providing minimal light. I used the first aid kit to clean and rebandage my neck wound. It would scar badly, but infection was the least of my worries now. Sitting in that dark room, gun on my lap, I had time to think about what came next. I'd always been good at adapting, at creating new identities and starting over. But this was different. This wasn't changing towns or changing names. This was a whole new world, one where my skills might actually be useful for something other than stealing. I thought about Walsh and Garcia, about the nurse who'd tried to stitch me up, about the woman in the parking lot trying to save her child. All people I couldn't or wouldn't help. 10 years of looking out for only myself had served me well in my old life. But in this new one, I wasn't so sure. Outside, the darkness was alive with distant screams and the occasional gunshot. Humanity's last stand, playing out in isolated pockets across the country. And here I was, Maddox Reed, a name that wasn't even mine, sitting alone in a gas station, wondering if a man who'd spent his life taking from others had anything left to give. The world had given me a second chance, a clean slate in a dirty world. The question was, what would I do with it? The world hadn't ended. It had transformed. That was my first coherent thought as Ray and I crept through Millbrook's devastated streets toward the police station. 4 blocks had never felt so far. "Stay low," Ray whispered, motioning toward an overturned mail truck. "Movement ahead." I followed his lead, crouching behind the vehicle. Through the gathering dusk, I could make out a small group of infected milling around the intersection. Their heads swiveled in unison at a distant sound, glass breaking somewhere up the street. They shambled toward it like moths drawn to flame, their coordination unnervingly precise despite their fractured movements. They hunt better in groups, Ray noted, like wolves, but dumber. We waited until they disappeared around a corner before continuing. The police station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with barred windows and a flagpole out front. The American flag still fluttered weakly in the evening breeze, tattered and blood-spattered but somehow still flying. "Something's wrong," Ray said as we approached. The front doors stood wide open. No lights, no movement inside. "Should be locked down automatically." I readied the shotgun. Maybe someone disabled it. Trying to get in or out. "Only 4 of us had the codes," Ray replied, drawing his service weapon. "And I saw 2 of them go down this morning." The station's lobby was a scene from a slaughterhouse. Blood painted the walls in arterial sprays and handprints. A body lay draped across the reception desk, the back of its skull missing. Not infected. Someone had put them down before they could turn. Ray moved with the precision of a man on his home turf, checking corners, scanning for threats. I followed, watching our 6, an instinct honed through years of breaking and entering. We made an unlikely pair, the law and the lawless, working in perfect tandem. "Dispatch is clear," Ray reported, checking the communications room. "Radio's dead, landlines too." We moved deeper into the station, clearing rooms systematically. Evidence lockup, break room, locker room, all empty. No survivors, no infected. Just bloodstains and silence. "Armory next," Ray said, heading down a corridor. "If we're lucky, they didn't get to it before." A sound stopped us both, metal scraping against concrete. From behind a heavy door marked "Holding." Ray tensed. Could be Marcus. He was on booking duty this morning. Or could be what's left of Marcus, I countered, raising the shotgun. Ray unlocked the door with keys from his belt, pushing it open carefully. The holding area contained 6 cells, 3 on each side of a central walkway. 5 stood empty, their doors hanging open. In the last cell, huddled in the corner, was a woman in her early 30s, clutching what looked like a police baton. "Ray!" she called out, her voice hoarse. "Jesus Christ, is that you?" "Ellie," he breathed, rushing to the cell. "You're alive!" She emerged from the shadows, and I could see dried blood caking the side of her face. Officer's uniform, badge still pinned to her chest. Her eyes locked on me, narrowing with suspicion. "Who the hell is this?" "He's with me," Ray said, unlocking her cell. "Maddox, we're working together." Ellie stepped out, never taking her eyes off me. "Working together? Ray, do you know who—" "I know exactly who he is," Ray cut her off. "Doesn't matter now. Tell me what happened here." She glanced between us, clearly struggling with the New World Order, then relented. "It was chaos. Started around noon, calls coming in from everywhere. Attacks, biting incidents. We thought it was some kind of mass psychosis, maybe a drug. Then Marcus brought in a perp who'd been bitten. Guy coded right in the booking area, then came back. How did you end up locked in there?" I asked. "Chief's orders. When things got bad, he told me to secure myself in a cell. Said he'd come back with help." She swallowed hard. "He never did." Ray placed a hand on her shoulder. "The armory? Should be untouched. Chief had the only key besides yours?" We moved through the station to a reinforced door at the end of a hallway. Ray's hand trembled slightly as he unlocked it. Inside was a prepper's dream. Shotguns, rifles, handguns. Boxes of ammunition stacked on metal shelves, tactical gear, even a few gas masks. "Christmas came early," I muttered, surveying the bounty. Ellie shot me a look. "This isn't for you to steal." I met her gaze evenly. "Not planning to steal anything, officer. Just trying to stay alive. Same as you." Ray intervened. "Enough. We gear up, grab what we can carry, and figure out our next move." We worked silently, loading weapons and tactical vests. Through a small window in the armory, I could see darkness settling over Millbrook. Night would bring new dangers. The infected seemed more active after dark, more aggressive. "We need to get out of town," I said finally. Military setting up quarantine zones. Heard it on the radio. Ray nodded. Highway patrol has an outpost about 20 miles north. Might be our best bet. If it's still there, Ellie said quietly. A crash from the front of the building cut off further discussion. Multiple impacts, heavy and deliberate. The infected had found us. Back door, Ray ordered. Through the bullpen. We moved quickly, loaded down with weapons and supplies. The main office area, the bullpen, was dark, desks standing like islands in shadow. Through the windows, I could see shapes moving in the parking lot, dozens of them, converging on the station. Someone should create a diversion, I said, eyeing the emergency exit. Draw them away from the back. Ray and Ellie exchanged glances. I'll do it, I continued before they could respond. I'm faster alone. Why would you help us? Ellie demanded. What's your angle? A fair question. Why was I helping them? I'd spent my whole life looking out for number one. Running, taking, surviving. But maybe that life had run its course. No angle, I replied. Just figured 3 guns are better than 1. Ray studied me for a long moment, then nodded. What's your plan? Cruiser's still got a siren, right? I'll drive around front, hit the lights and siren, lead them away. Circle back and meet you down the road. That's suicide, Ellie objected. Only if I screw up. I flashed her the cocky grin that had charmed bank tellers and border guards through the years. Not really my style. Ray handed me a police radio. Channel 3, we'll wait for your signal, then bug out. The decision made. We moved to our positions. At the side entrance, Ray gripped my arm. Why are you really doing this? I considered lying, then shrugged. Maybe I'm tired of only saving myself. The cruiser was where we'd left it, behind the gas station. As I approached, I spotted movement. A lone infected, once the station's clerk, judging by the tattered uniform. He turned toward me, jaw working soundlessly, arms outstretched. I dispatched him quietly with my knife, a skill learned in years of silent breaking and entering. No sound, no wasted motion. The body collapsed with barely a thud. Inside the cruiser, I took a moment to check the gear we'd packed. Weapons, ammunition, first aid supplies, food and water, tools for survival in this new broken world. The radio crackled. Ray's voice, tense but steady. Maddox, what's your status? Ready, I replied. On my way. I started the engine and floored it, tires squealing as I whipped around to the front of the police station. When I hit the lights and siren, the effect was immediate. Every infected head in sight swiveled toward me, their collective attention locked on the flashing lights and wailing siren. They surged forward like a tide of broken bodies, stumbling over each other in their rush to reach the cruiser. I kept the vehicle rolling just fast enough to stay ahead of them, leading them away from the station's back entrance. Through the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Ray and Ellie making their break, running low and fast toward the tree line behind the station. Good. Phase 1 complete. I led the growing horde of infected down Main Street, away from both the station and Ray's planned escape route. The cruiser's engine roared as I pushed it to 40, then 50 miles per hour. Fast enough to break away when needed, slow enough to keep the infected following. 2 blocks. 3. The infected fell behind but kept coming, drawn by the noise. I cut the siren but left the lights flashing, still attracting attention, but giving myself room to maneuver. At the edge of town, I spotted what I was looking for, a fork in the road. Left would take me toward the highway patrol outpost Ray had mentioned. Right led deeper into countryside I didn't know. I'd planned to go left, circle back to find Ray and Ellie. But as I approached the intersection, I saw something that changed everything. A school bus, its front end smashed against a telephone pole. Children's faces pressed against the windows, illuminated in the cruiser's headlights. Alive, trapped, and surrounded by infected pounding on the metal sides. I hit the brakes, decision made before I even realized it. The radio crackled to life. Maddox, we're clear. What's your position? I picked up the handset. Change of plans, found survivors, school bus off Route 16. Wait for us. Ray's voice came back immediately. Don't engage alone. But the infected were already breaching the emergency exit at the back of the bus. I could hear screams from inside. "No time," I replied. "Don't worry about me. Get to the outpost. I'll catch up." I didn't wait for his response. Grabbing the shotgun and a spare handgun, I left the cruiser's lights flashing to keep most of the infected distracted and ran toward the bus. The first infected went down with a shotgun blast to the head. The second turned toward me, blood dripping from its chin, eyes vacant. I recognized the tattered remains of a school uniform, a teenager, someone's child. I hesitated for a split second, then fired. The body dropped. The back door of the bus had been forced open. 2 infected were already inside. Grabbing at screaming children, I emptied the shotgun into the first, swapped to the handgun for the second. Clean headshots, just like Walsh had taught me in his final moments. Inside the bus, chaos reigned. A dozen children, elementary age, huttered at the front. A woman I assumed was the driver stood between them and the infected, wielding what looked like a fire extinguisher. "Get down!" I shouted, taking aim at an infected crawling through a broken window. The shot echoed inside the metal confines of the bus, sending the children into fresh screams of terror. 4 more infected down, and suddenly it was quiet except for the children sobbing. The driver lowered her makeshift weapon, staring at me with equal parts relief and suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Someone trying to help," I replied, reloading the shotgun. "We need to move. That noise will bring more." She nodded, maternal instinct overriding caution. The doors jammed. "Engines dead. We've been trapped here for hours." I kicked at the folding doors, forcing them open with a screech of protesting metal. Outside, more infected were shambling toward us, drawn away from the cruiser by the gunshots. "Everyone stay together," I ordered. "I'll clear a path, head for the police car." The driver organized the children with practiced efficiency. "Buddy system. Hold hands. Follow Mr. Maddox," I supplied, not bothering with the false surname. We moved as a unit, the children wide-eyed with terror but surprisingly disciplined. The driver, Ms. Hammond, according to the kids, kept them moving with gentle but firm commands. The cruiser was 50 yards away, across an open stretch of road. Too far for the little ones to run without risking someone falling behind, and the infected were closing in from all sides, drawn by movement and the children's whispers. I made a decision. "Ms. Hammond, take this." I handed her the handgun. "You know how to use it?" She nodded grimly. "My brother's a cop. Get them to the car, I'll buy you time." Before she could argue, I strode toward the approaching infected, shotgun raised. Every shot was deliberate, economical. Headshots only, no wasted ammunition. I'd always been precise in my work, and now that precision was keeping children alive. Behind me, I heard Ms. Hammond ushering the kids toward the cruiser. I backed up slowly, maintaining distance between the infected and the escaping group. When I ran out of shotgun shells, I switched to my combat knife, taking down infected with quick thrusts to the base of the skull. A messy business, but effective. "Maddox, come on," Ms. Hammond called. She had the children loaded into the cruiser, the engine running. I turned to run, but my foot caught on an uneven patch of asphalt. I went down hard, the knife skittering away. An infected was on me before I could recover, teeth snapping inches from my face. I held it back with one arm, the other groping blindly for the knife. My fingers closed around the handle just as the infected's weight suddenly disappeared. Ray stood over me, his service weapon smoking. The infected lay next to me, half its head missing. "Thought you could use a hand," he said, helping me to my feet. Ellie was already at the cruiser, helping Ms. Hammond organize the terrified children. "You came back," I said, somewhat stupidly. Ray shrugged. "Couldn't let you have all the fun." We piled into the cruiser, grossly overloaded with adults and children. I ended up in the front passenger seat, with Ray driving and 2 of the smallest kids on my lap. As we pulled away, leaving the infected behind, I caught the look on Ms. Hammond's face in the rearview mirror. Pure gratitude. No one had ever looked at me like that before, like I was worth something, like I mattered. We drove in silence for several miles, the children gradually calming. One by one, they fell asleep, exhausted from hours of terror. Ms. Hammond explained in hushed tones what had happened. A field trip cut short when news of the outbreak reached them. The crash when their bus driver succumbed to a fever he'd been hiding all morning. "I've never fired a gun before today," she admitted quietly. "Never thought I would." "You did good," I told her. "Kept those kids alive." She studied me with tired eyes. "You're not really a police officer, are you?" I glanced at Ray, who kept his focus on the road. "No," I answered honestly, "I'm not." She nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "Doesn't matter. You saved us. That's what counts now." As we approached the highway patrol outpost, I could see it was still operational. Floodlights illuminated a makeshift barricade. Armed officers directed a trickle of survivors through a checkpoint. A safe haven, at least for now. Ray slowed the cruiser. "Maddox," he said, voice low so only I could hear. "There are officers there who will recognize you." I nodded, understanding the implication. "Pull over. I'll make my own way." "That's not what I meant." He pulled off onto the shoulder, just out of sight of the outpost's lights. "Those kids in there? They're alive because of you, Ms. Hammond too. So I'm going to tell them you're an undercover federal agent, that you were embedded with a criminal organization when the outbreak hit." He met my eyes steadily. "You deserve a second chance, we all do." I didn't know what to say. 10 years on the run, and now a cop was offering to help me create a new identity. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Why?" I finally asked. Ray looked back at the sleeping children. "Because the world's different now, and we need people who can do what you did back there. People who can make the hard calls. Who can survive." He paused. "Besides, who's going to run a background check during the apocalypse?" I considered his offer. A clean slate, a chance to be someone different, someone better. "What about Ellie? She knows who I am." "She'll keep quiet. I've known her 10 years, she understands what's at stake." As if summoned by her name, Ellie leaned forward from the back seat. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think he's right. I saw what you did for those kids." A small hand tugged at my sleeve. One of the children on my lap had woken up, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with braided hair and solemn eyes. "Are we safe now?" she asked. I looked out at the outpost, then back at her. "Yeah," I said, "you're safe now." She nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes again. Just like that, trusting me completely. We pulled back onto the road and approached the checkpoint. As we did, I thought about Walsh and Egon back at the hospital. About the nurse who'd tried to stitch me up. About the people I couldn't save and the ones I hadn't tried to. For 10 years, I'd been a ghost. Robberies, disappearances, names that weren't mine. I'd been smart, careful, always one step ahead. I'd lived for myself and only myself. And where had it gotten me? Number 7 on the FBI's most wanted list. No roots, no connections, nothing that mattered. Now the world had changed. The law was gone, but somehow I'd found a moral code I never knew I had. Maybe it had always been there, buried under years of survival and self-interest. Or maybe it took the end of the world for me to find something worth fighting for. As we passed through the checkpoint, an officer recognized Ray and waved us through without inspection. Just like that, Maddox farewell, criminal, thief, fugitive, ceased to exist. In his place was just Maddox, survivor, protector. The little girl stirred in my lap again, wrapping small fingers around my hand in her sleep. I found myself holding on, making a silent promise I never thought I'd make. I'd keep her safe, all of them, for as long as I could, in this broken world that had somehow given me a second chance. Maybe that's what I needed, a clean slate in a dirty world. And if the dead didn't care about redemption, well, the living still did. Looking around at the faces of those I'd helped save, I realized something that surprised me. I wanted to deserve this. Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comments section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I keep replaying that moment in my head, the exact second when I realized what they were asking me to do. I've spent 12 years in the Air Force, flown combat missions over 3 continents, dropped ordnance on targets designated by intelligence officers I'd never met. But nothing prepared me for the order to rain fire on Harrisburg, my home, where Lauren and Kelly were waiting for me. It all happened so fast, 12 hours. That's all it took for everything to fall apart. Dawn broke over Fort Indian Town Gap with clear skies and perfect flying conditions. I'd been up since 0500, running pre-flight checks on my F-16. We'd been on elevated alert for 3 days due to the medical situation developing downtown, but details were sparse. Just another training day, or so I thought. Captain Silas Grady, call sign Reaper. 34 years old with a wife and 8-year-old daughter living in the suburbs of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That was me 12 hours ago. Now, I don't know what I am anymore. The first hint that something was seriously wrong came during our morning briefing. Colonel Asher Doyle's face was drawn, his usual military calm replaced by something I'd never seen before: fear. "Gentlemen, we're initiating Operation Firewall," he announced, bringing up satellite imagery of Harrisburg and the surrounding areas. Red zones marked throughout the city core, spreading outward like a bloodstain. As of 0400 this morning, federal authorities have classified the Harrisburg situation as a Level 5 biohazard event. The room went silent. Level 5 was the highest designation, the kind reserved for apocalyptic scenarios in training exercises, never real operations. "The infection has spread beyond containment parameters," Doyle continued. "National Guard checkpoints have been overrun. CDC teams are reporting." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Complete social breakdown within affected areas." My hand shot up. "Sir, what exactly is this infection? We've been hearing rumors, but..." "It's a rabies-like pathogen that spreads through fluid contact. Bite transmission is confirmed. Infected individuals exhibit extreme aggression and attack non-infected on sight." His eyes scanned the room. "I know how this sounds, gentlemen, but I've seen the footage. These people, these infected, they're not people anymore. Zombies, he wasn't using the word, but that's what he was describing." The room erupted with questions. Blackwood silenced them with a raised hand. "Governor Neal has authorized Protocol 7 Alpha for downtown Harrisburg. We deploy at 1600 hours. My blood turned to ice. Protocol 7 Alpha. Tactical bombing of civilian areas to contain a biohazard. I'd only ever seen it in theoretical exercises. "Sir?" I stood up, my voice steadier than I felt. "There are still thousands of civilians in those areas. Evacuation routes were jammed when I drove in this morning. My family is in Oakwood Heights, I know, Grady." Doyle's expression softened slightly. "Which is currently outside the designated strike zone. But I need to know if this is going to be a problem for you." I swallowed hard, feeling every eye in the room on me. "No, sir, no problem." I was lying, of course. After the briefing, I tried calling Lauren. No answer. Texts wouldn't go through either. The cell networks were overwhelmed or down. I tried to focus on equipment checks, on the mission parameters, but my mind kept drifting to our little house on Maple Street, to Lauren, a kindergarten teacher who'd be at school when this started, to Kelly, who would have been in the 3rd grade classroom just down the hall. The base was transforming around us. Security teams in hazmat gear established checkpoints between sectors. Medical personnel rushed to set up decontamination zones. Through it all, I kept checking my phone, desperate for any sign from Ellie. At 1100 hours, I snuck away to the communications center. Maya Powell was on duty. We'd been friends since flight school, and she'd come to our home for Thanksgiving last year. "I need to get a message to Oakwood Heights," I told her, trying to keep my voice low. "Official channels, it's urgent." Maya glanced around before pulling me behind her console. It's bad out there, Silas. Really bad. She pulled up traffic camera feeds on her monitor. Downtown Harrisburg looked like a war zone. Cars abandoned on jammed streets, pillars of smoke rising from buildings, and people running, fighting, some moving with strange, aggressive motions. Jesus, I whispered. Are those infected? Yes. Maya typed rapidly, trying different communication channels. It started at Harrisburg General around 0200. Patient brought in from a car accident. He'd been bitten somehow before the crash, turned in the ER and attacked the staff. By dawn, the hospital was completely overrun. The camera feed switched to a residential area I recognized, just a few blocks from the elementary school where Ellie worked. I know. Maya squeezed my arm. Emergency services reported a breach at Lincoln Elementary around 08:30. Some of the children were evacuated, but... She trailed off. My heart seized in my chest. Maya, I need to know if they got out. Communications are spotty. The school buses were heading for the evacuation center at Oakwood Mall. That's all I know. She looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're not thinking of... Just get me any information you can, please. I returned to the flight line, mind racing. Technicians were loading our aircraft with air-to-ground missiles, enough firepower to level city blocks. My squadron mates were grim-faced, focused on the mission. None of them had family in the city. At 1300 hours, my phone vibrated. A text from Lauren, finally. At mall with Kelly. Situation terrible. Military turning people away. Rumors of bombing. Please help. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by dread. They were alive, but at Oakwood Mall. Inside what would soon be the strike zone. The map Blackwood had shown us included the major evacuation centers as primary targets. Too many infected mixed with the crowds, they'd said. Too dangerous to leave intact. I had 3 hours until deployment. 3 hours to make the hardest decision of my life. The opportunity came at 14:30. A security breach in the west quadrant of the base. Infected personnel had somehow gotten through the perimeter. Alarms blared as security teams scrambled to contain the situation. In the chaos, I slipped away to the communications center again. Maya was still there, her face pale. It's falling apart, Silas. Command is talking about expanding the strike zone. Oakwood Heights, Paradise Valley, they're considering it all contaminated now. I need to reach my family, I said, the decision already made in my heart. Can you get me base transport authorization? She stared at me for a long moment. You're going AWOL in the middle of a biohazard event. That's court-martial at best, Silas. Treason at worst. They're going to bomb civilians, Maya. My family. Your friends. I held her gaze. I took an oath to protect this country. That includes my wife and daughter. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded and began typing. Emergency Response Vehicle Authorization Code Delta 7. It'll get you through the military checkpoints. She handed me a clearance card. But Marcus, what you're seeing on these cameras, it's worse out there. Much worse. I'll find them, I promised. Somehow. I was almost to the motor pool when my radio crackled. Captain Grady, report to command immediately. Doyle's voice tense and urgent. They knew I had seconds to decide. Continue with my plan and become a deserter, or report as ordered and try to reason with command. My training told me to follow the chain of command. My heart told me something else entirely. I turned and ran toward the airfield. The F-16 sat on the tarmac, loaded and ready. Flight crews were busy with final preparations, no one paying attention to a pilot arriving early for pre-flight checks. I climbed into my aircraft, heart pounding as I began the startup sequence from memory. Tower to Viper 4. You are not authorized for takeoff. Repeat, shut down immediately. I ignored the radio, continuing through the checklist. Alarms were sounding now. I could see security vehicles racing across the tarmac. Captain Grady, this is Colonel Doyle. Stand down now. That's an order. I took a deep breath and keyed the radio. Sir, with all due respect, I cannot comply with Protocol 7 Alpha. My family is in that strike zone. Grady, listen to me. We've been through the scenarios. If this infection spreads beyond Harrisburg, beyond Pennsylvania, millions could die. This is bigger than any of us. Then find another way. My voice was steady as I pushed the throttle forward. This isn't protection, sir. It's murder. The F-16 began to move, gathering speed. Through my canopy, I could see armed security forming a line, weapons raised. They wouldn't shoot, not at an armed F-16 with enough ordnance to turn the base into a crater. Grady, your wife and daughter are probably already infected. Think about what you're doing! The wheels lifted off the tarmac. The F-16 responded like it always did. Perfect, powerful, now turned against its masters. I banked hard, away from the base, setting course for Harrisburg. I am thinking about it, sir. I switched off the radio, severing my last connection to the military structure that had defined my life. Below me, I could see the infection spread like a physical entity. Abandoned cars clogging highways, smoke rising from neighborhoods, the organized grid of the city giving way to chaos, and approaching from the west, barely visible dots that I recognized as the rest of my squadron, scrambled early to intercept me, or perhaps to begin the bombing run without me. I pushed the aircraft lower, flying below radar coverage, using the terrain to mask my approach. The mall was 15 minutes away. The other F-16s would be on me in 10. My mind flashed to the weapon systems at my disposal. Air-to-air missiles designed to knock other fighters from the sky. I had trained with these men, eaten with them, trusted them with my life. Would I fire on them if they tried to stop me? Would they fire on me? The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across a city in chaos. Somewhere down there, Lauren and Kelly were waiting, not knowing if help would come, not knowing that their own government had marked them for death to contain the infection. I adjusted my course, descended further, and made a silent promise. I would find them. No matter what stood in my way, infected, military, or my own doubts, I would bring them home. The city of Harrisburg spread out beneath me, burning and broken. Home. And I was its only hope. Banking hard over Harrisburg at 5,000 feet, I confronted the full horror of what lay below. The orderly grid of city streets had transformed into a labyrinth of chaos. Gridlocked vehicles abandoned mid-escape, buildings belching black smoke, and the infected, thousands of them, swarming through the concrete maze. From this height they moved with terrible synchronicity, flowing between obstacles with primal purpose. My radar warning receiver chirped, friendly aircraft approaching fast. My squadron mates no doubt scrambled to intercept me or begin their bombing run. I had minutes, at most, before they were within weapons range. The mission was clear in my mind. Reach the mall, extract Lauren and Kelly, get clear before the bombers arrived. But as I began my descent, a desperate voice crackled through my emergency band radio. Anyone, please, trapped on hospital roof. 36 people, children and injured, they're breaking through the door. I spotted the source instantly, Harrisburg General's helipad, where a cluster of survivors had gathered, waving frantically at my aircraft. Infected were pouring into the stairwell access, the makeshift barricade visibly failing. The mall was 5 miles east. Lauren and Kelly were waiting. Every second counted, but those people would die in minutes. Hospital roof. This is Air Force Captain Silas Grady. I see you. Stand clear of the north edge. Repeat, clear the north edge now. I didn't wait for acknowledgement. Dropping to 2,000 feet, I selected one of my AGM-65 Maverick missiles and locked onto the rooftop stairwell entrance. The targeting system chimed confirmation. Missile away. The explosion rocked the entire roof, obliterating the stairwell structure and any infected inside it. Through my canopy, I saw survivors pressed against the far wall, shielding children with their bodies. Hospital roof. Stairwell is sealed. You're secure for now, but I can't extract you. My mind raced through options. Mark your position with anything visible. I'll relay your coordinates for emergency evacuation. I couldn't land to help them, but I could ensure someone knew they were there. I transmitted their position to all emergency frequencies, hoping someone would respond. That's when I spotted the school buses. 3 yellow buses, surrounded by infected on Veterans Bridge. halfway across the Susquehanna River. Through my targeting system's magnification, I could make out children's faces pressed against windows, adults fighting desperately to keep the infected from breaking in. They were trapped mid-evacuation. I didn't hesitate. Banking toward the bridge, I selected another missile and calculated the blast radius. Too close to the buses would destroy them. Too far would be ineffective. This is Captain Grady to buses on Veterans Bridge. If you can hear me, brace for impact. I'm going to clear a path on your eastern flank. The missile streaked away, impacting precisely where I'd aimed, 50 yards ahead of the lead bus. The explosion sent infected flying, creating a corridor of momentary safety. I circled back, watching as the bus doors opened and the drivers gunned their engines, plowing through the burning debris and scattered infected. They were moving, escaping the death trap of the bridge. 2 missiles expended, 4 remaining. The mall still 5 minutes away. I was about to bank east when movement caught my eye. A group of about 30 people sprinting across the Market Street Bridge, pursued by a mass of infected. They'd almost reached the far side when I noticed another problem. Infected were converging from the opposite bank as well, creating a deadly pincer movement. Within minutes, they'd be trapped mid-span. This is Air Force Captain Grady to civilians on Market Street Bridge. If you can hear me, stop and take cover behind vehicles. There was no way to know if they heard me, but I saw several in the group look up at my aircraft. Then miraculously, they began following my instructions, ducking behind abandoned cars and concrete barriers. I swooped lower, making rapid calculations. If I destroyed the eastern end of the bridge, it would cut off the approaching infected and give the survivors a chance to escape westward. Taking cover now, a voice responded on the emergency band. Please help, we have children with us. I locked onto the eastern approach of the bridge, careful to maintain distance from the survivors' position. Stand by for impact. Keep your heads down. The missile streaked away, finding its mark with perfect precision. The eastern end of the bridge erupted in concrete and steel, sending infected plummeting into the Susquehanna River below. The explosion echoed across the water as I circled back, watching the survivors emerge from cover and rush toward the western bank, their escape route now clear. Bridge is clear. Get to safety, I transmitted, receiving a faint thank you in response. 3 missiles expended, 3 remaining. The mall still 5 minutes away. My radio crackled again. Different voice, same desperation. Air Force, hear us. Trapped at Capitol Building. National Guard outpost overwhelmed. 60+ civilians. I spotted the Capitol's distinctive dome through smoke plumes. The ornate steps were black with swarming infected, while defenders on the balconies fired sporadically into the mass. They were nearly overrun. My radar pinged again. The squadron was closing fast. 7 minutes until they reached me. Capitol Building, hold position, clearing your perimeter. 2 more missiles carefully placed to maximum effect. The steps vanished in twin blossoms of fire and debris. The shockwaves scattered the infected like bowling pins, giving the defenders precious minutes to regroup. I was down to my last pair of missiles, fuel gauge dipping into reserves. The mall finally came into view. A sprawling commercial complex surrounded by a sea of vehicles and infected. They clustered thickest at the main entrances, drawn by the survivors inside. Viper 4, this is Viper Lead. We have you on radar. Captain Devin Walker's voice. Tense but professional. Colonel Doyle has authorized us to use whatever means necessary to prevent interference with Operation Firewall. I keyed my radio. Devin, this is Silas. The mall has hundreds of survivors, civilians, children. My family is in there, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this if there was any other option. Silence stretched for what felt like eternity. You're asking us to disobey direct orders during a national emergency. I'm asking you to remember who we are, what we stand for. I swallowed hard. Look at your targeting map. That's not just a grid reference, that's thousands of Americans. Your neighbors, your friends. My voice broke slightly. Your daughter had a playdate with Kelly last month, Devin. Remember? The silence that followed seemed to last forever. We've been authorized to expand the strike zone, he finally replied. I've got 3 primary targets to hit before the mall. That gives you maybe 15 minutes before we have to go weapons hot on your position. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Don't thank me. If you're not clear by then, we won't have a choice. His voice softened slightly. Find them and get out, Silas. And for what it's worth, I hope you make it. The squadron split formation, banking toward their alternate targets. I pushed my throttle forward, racing toward Oakwood Mall while scanning for a viable insertion point. The mall's glass roof would give me visibility inside, but landing was impossible. The parking lot was too crowded with abandoned vehicles and infected. I'd have to find another way in. That's when inspiration struck. The F-16 itself could be my final weapon. I plotted a collision course for the main concentration of infected at the front entrance. The jet would create a diversion and clear a path, but I'd need to eject and somehow make it inside. My radar warned of approaching aircraft, the squadron returning from their designated targets. Time was running out. I made one final pass, low enough to see movement through the glass ceiling. People huddled in stores, hiding from infected that prowled the corridors. I thought I glimpsed a group in the food court that matched Lauren's description of their location. Setting the autopilot on its terminal course, I prepared for ejection. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and I'd miss the mall entirely. Too late and I'd go down with the plane. Hang on, Lauren. I'm coming, I whispered, pulling the ejection handle. Explosive bolts fired, blasting the canopy away. G-forces slammed me back as the seat rocketed upward, launching me into open air. The parachute deployed automatically, snapping open with a force that knocked the wind from my lungs. Below, my F-16 completed its final mission, slamming into the mall entrance in a spectacular fireball. The explosion consumed dozens of infected instantly, the shockwave scattering hundreds more. Every infected within sight immediately changed direction, drawn to the flames and chaos. I'd aimed for the mall roof, but the explosive ejection and crosswinds knocked me off course. I was drifting toward the parking lot, right into the heart of where the infected were now gathering, drawn by the explosion. No, no, no! I fought with the parachute controls, trying to adjust my descent. Too low now to make any significant changes. The parking lot rushed up at me, a maze of abandoned vehicles and wandering infected. The impact came harder than expected. My right ankle twisted as I hit the pavement, sending shooting pain up my leg. Worse, the wind caught my parachute, dragging me across the asphalt toward a light pole. I clawed desperately at the quick-release buckles of my harness. But before I could free myself, the chute wrapped around the pole, jerking me to a sudden, violent stop. The impact left me dazed, hanging half-suspended between ground and pole. Blood trickled into my eyes from a gash on my forehead. Through the haze, I saw them coming, dozens of infected drawn by the noise and movement. The closest was maybe 30 yards away, a woman in a torn business suit, her gait unnaturally fluid despite the broken angle of her left leg. I fumbled for my sidearm, fingers clumsy with adrenaline and disorientation. The buckles of my harness refused to cooperate, leaving me trapped in the tangled lines of the parachute. The infected woman was closing fast, mouth open in a soundless snarl, hands reaching. My pistol finally came free. I raised it, steadied my aim despite the pounding in my head, and fired. The shot went wide. I took a breath, focused through the pain, and fired again. This time the bullet found its mark, dropping the infected woman mid-stride. But there were more coming. Many more. The parachute had me pinned against the light pole, an easy target. I fired again and again, each shot dropping an infected but hardly making a dent in their numbers. 8 rounds left. 7, 6. The nearest infected was 10 yards away when I finally managed to release one buckle, partially freeing myself from the harness. I kicked and twisted, fighting against the remaining straps. 5 rounds left. Another infected down. 4 rounds. I dropped to one knee, still partially entangled but now able to move. 3 rounds left in the magazine. The closest infected was close enough that I could smell the metallic tang of blood on its clothes. 2 rounds. 1. Click. Empty. I drew my combat knife as the nearest infected lunged, catching it in the throat with the blade. Hot, dark blood poured over my hand as I shoved the body away. Another took its place immediately, this one in a mall security uniform. I slashed at its face, blade biting deep. But it kept coming, unfazed by injuries that would have incapacitated or killed any living person. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement by the mall entrance, a door opening, a figure in a police uniform raising a shotgun. The blast caught the security guard zombie square in the back, dropping it instantly. "Move your ass," the officer shouted, firing again at the approaching horde. "I can't hold them long." I finally freed myself from the last of the harness, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ankle as I sprinted toward the door. The officer fired 3 more times, each shot creating momentary space in the wall of infected pursuing me. I dove through the doorway, the officer slamming it shut behind me and throwing his weight against it as infected bodies crashed against the metal. Another officer appeared, helping barricade the entrance with a vending machine. "You're one crazy bastard," the first officer said, checking the loads in his shotgun. "That your plane that just went kamikaze on the north entrance?" I nodded, trying to catch my breath. "My family's in here somewhere. Wife and daughter. Food court, last I heard." The officer, his name tag read Daniels, exchanged looks with his partner. "Food court's been secure for the past hour. We've got about 100 civilians gathered there. Command center of sorts." My heart leapt. "Take me there, please." Daniels nodded, leading me through service corridors lit by emergency lighting. We passed barricaded store entrances, small groups of survivors huddled in darkness. The officer moved with practiced efficiency, checking corners before proceeding. From somewhere deeper in the mall, I could hear infected moaning, the sound bouncing off marble floors and glass storefronts. "Most of the zombies are concentrated at the main entrances," Daniels explained. "Something about the noise and movements draws them. We've managed to secure the central areas, at least for now." "How long have you been holding out?" I asked as we climbed a disabled escalator to the second floor. "Since about 0900, the initial wave hit the east entrance. Some infected woman crashed her car through the glass doors. After that," he shook his head, "it was chaos. People running, screaming, perfect zombie bait. Those of us with any sense or training managed to organize defensive positions, get survivors to safer areas." We reached a set of double doors marked food court that had been reinforced with display racks and what looked like pieces of broken furniture. 2 armed civilians stood guard, nodding at Daniels as we approached. "Found another one," Daniels told them. "He's the crazy pilot who just took out half the zombies at the north entrance." The guards studied me with newfound respect, clearing a path through the barricade. Daniels pushed open the doors, revealing a scene I hadn't dared hope for. The food court had been transformed into an organized sanctuary. Tables formed a perimeter, behind which armed civilians kept watch. The central eating area was filled with survivors, at least 100 people sitting in small groups on the floor. Some were injured, receiving basic first aid from what appeared to be medical professionals. Others were comforting children or distributing water bottles from behind the counters. And there, sitting near what used to be a pretzel stand, was Lauren. Kelly asleep in her lap, her hand gently stroking our daughter's hair. "Lauren," I whispered, then louder. "Lauren!" She looked up, disbelief flooding her face, then recognition. She carefully shifted Kelly aside and stood, her hand covering her mouth. For a moment, we were frozen, 2 points in space connected by invisible threads of relief and disbelief. Then we were running toward each other, closing the distance in heartbeats. I wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her hair, breathing in her scent, sweat and fear and that familiar coconut shampoo she always used. She was crying, or maybe I was, or maybe we both were. "Silas," she gasped against my neck. How did you?" "I came for you," I said simply. "I had to." Kelly stirred, looking up with eyes clouded by sleep. Then they cleared and she was scrambling to her feet. "Daddy!" she cried, throwing herself into our embrace. I lifted her up, holding her tight against my chest, feeling her small heart racing against mine. For one perfect moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no infection, no bombers, no collapsing civilization. Just the three of us, reunited against impossible odds. Reality crashed back as my radio crackled to life. Devon's voice cut through the static. "Viper 4, this is Viper Lead. We're on final approach. 5 minutes to target. Tell me you're clear." Lauren tensed in my arms, recognizing the significance of the transmission even if she didn't understand the specifics. I gently set Kelly down and keyed the radio. "Viper Lead, this is Viper 4. I found them. They're alive. Hundreds of survivors in here. Divin, children, families." Silence. Then, "What's your extraction plan?" "Working on it." I looked around at the gathered survivors, at the makeshift organization they'd created. "We need more time." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost feel the weight of the decision Devon was making, the clash between duty and humanity. "Silas," his voice softer now, more personal. "The order comes from the top. Governor Neal himself. If I don't hit that target, you know what you're being asked to do, Devon. You can see them through your targeting systems. These aren't infected, they're survivors." More silence. Then I heard muffled voices, as if Devon was conferring with the other pilots. Finally, "Listen up, Viper 4. I'm calling an audible. Operation has been temporarily delayed due to technical issues with targeting systems." The implication was clear. He was buying us time. "We're instructed to create an evacuation corridor on the eastern side of the city. Highway 322 toward Hershey will be cleared for the next 2 hours." I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Devon replied, his voice tight. "This buys you time, not absolution. You get those people out, then you and I have a long conversation about this at some point." A pause. "If we survive." "Copy that. Viper, lead out." I turned to Lauren, who was watching me with a question in her eyes. "The bombing run's been called off. They're creating an escape corridor east of the city. We have 2 hours." Officer Daniels had heard the exchange. 2 hours to evacuate 100 people through zombie-infested streets? That's optimistic. "We've got vehicles at the loading docks," another survivor offered. A woman in a mall security uniform. 4 vans, 2 SUVs from the dealership showroom. Keys are in the security office. "That's enough for maybe 60 people," Daniels calculated. "If we pack them in tight." "My F-16 cleared most of the infected from the north entrance," I added. "They'll be drawn to the wreckage for a while, but we'll need to move fast before more arrive." Lauren squeezed my hand. "We'll need to organize by groups. Families with children first, then the injured who can be moved." The next 15 minutes were a blur of activity. Survivors organized into travel groups, distributed what weapons and supplies they had, planned their route to the evacuation corridor. I stood with Daniels and other armed volunteers, mapping out a defensive formation to protect the convoy. Kelly tugged at my flight suit. "Are we going to be okay, Daddy?" I knelt to her level, meeting her eyes directly. "I don't know what's waiting out there, sweetheart, but I promise you this. We're together now, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep us that way." She nodded solemnly, wrapping her arms around my neck in a tight hug. "I knew you'd come." Lauren joined us, resting her hand on my shoulder. "How bad is it out there?" "Really bad," I admitted quietly. "The city's falling apart. Military's established a quarantine perimeter. Devon and the others can give us a window, but after that..." I shook my head. "I don't know. But we have a chance. We have a chance." Officer Daniels approached, shotgun resting on his shoulder. "We're ready when you are, Captain. First vehicles are loaded and standing by." I stood, taking Lauren's hand in mine and keeping Kelly close to my side. "Let's move." As we headed toward the loading docks, I caught a glimpse of Harrisburg through a broken window. Smoke plumes marked where Devon and the squadron were striking alternate targets, creating our diversion. The city of my birth was burning, transforming into something unrecognizable. But somewhere beyond the flames and chaos was Highway 322, our escape route. And beyond that, uncertainty. But we were together. We had a plan. We had allies. It would have to be enough.
You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple. Subscribe. We've reached 10,000 corrupted souls. The void has grown powerful, but our hunger is endless. Our next conquest, 100,000 subscribers, before 2027 descends upon us. Will you join our ever-growing legion, or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. My name is Dr. Ethan Cross, and I need to tell you what happened in the Arabian Sea 3 months ago, before they find me. I'm a marine archaeologist with a doctorate in Near Eastern Studies from the University of Chicago, the kind of person who spent 15 years of his career believing everything had a rational explanation. I've excavated Phoenician shipwrecks off the coast of Lebanon, mapped submerged Bronze Age settlements in the Aegean, and published papers debunking sensationalist claims about Noah's Ark. Ancient texts were metaphors, I told my students. Supernatural events were primitive people misunderstanding natural phenomena. The book of Revelation was political allegory, not prophecy. I was so certain of my worldview, so confident in the supremacy of empirical evidence over superstition. I was catastrophically wrong about all of it, and now I'm running out of time to warn anyone who will listen. For 4 years, I worked for an organization called Covenant Research Institute, headquartered in a nondescript office building in Northern Virginia that could have housed any mid-sized tech company. Most people have never heard of them, which was intentional. We were privately funded by a consortium of religious institutions and wealthy individuals who believed that faith and science weren't opposing forces, but complementary tools for understanding truth. Our mission was to investigate the unexplained phenomena with biblical or historical religious connections, using cutting-edge technology to either verify or debunk claims that straddled the line between archaeology and theology. The work was fascinating in an academic sense. We'd analyze satellite imagery to verify flood narratives through sediment deposits, use ground-penetrating radar to search for lost cities mentioned in ancient texts, map trade routes described in Leviticus, and compare them to actual Bronze Age commerce patterns. We'd investigate claims of discovered ark fragments on Mount Ararat, usually debunking them within hours. We published papers in peer-reviewed journals, presented at conferences, maintained respectability in academic circles, despite our unconventional funding sources. It was methodical, careful work that rarely challenged my fundamental assumptions about reality. The closest we'd come to anything genuinely inexplicable was a geomagnetic anomaly near the Dead Sea that turned out to be a previously unknown salt dome, and some unusual bacterial colonies in the Red Sea that exhibited extremophile characteristics, but nothing supernatural. After 4 years, I'd started to think of the Institute as a well-funded exercise in confirming that biblical miracles had natural explanations, that faith and empirical observation occupied separate magisteria that never truly intersected. That comfortable certainty shattered on a Thursday night in mid-November when Dr. Rebecca Ashford called me at 10:17 p.m. Rebecca directed the Institute, a brilliant oceanographer in her early 50s who'd left a tenured position at Woods Hole to run CRI. She had steel grey hair she kept in a perpetually messy bun, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of measured temperament that never showed emotion unless the situation absolutely demanded it. In 4 years, I'd never heard panic in her voice until that night. "Ethan, I need you at the facility immediately," she said without preamble. "We have a situation that can't wait until morning." "What kind of situation?" "The kind I won't discuss over the phone. How quickly can you get here?" I lived in Arlington, 20 minutes from the facility in good traffic. I made it in 15, running 2 red lights. The security was noticeably tighter when I arrived. Instead of waving me through the gate with a friendly nod, the guard checked my ID 3 times, made me submit to a retinal scan we'd never used before, and radioed ahead for clearance. 2 more checkpoints inside the building, both manned by security personnel I'd never seen before, both armed with something more serious than the usual holstered sidearms. Rebecca met me in the secure briefing room on the 3rd sub-level, a windowless space designed for classified discussions. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally pristine appearance had given way to rumpled clothing and an empty coffee cup collection that suggested she'd been living in this room. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice tight with controlled stress. "What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. You'll need to sign an NDA before we proceed." I signed. She pulled up satellite imagery on the room's main display, a wall-sized screen that showed the Arabian Sea in false-color thermal imaging. "This appeared 12 days ago," she said, pointing to a perfect circle of blue amid warmer reds and oranges. The boundary was geometrically precise, unnaturally so. 5 miles in diameter, centered at coordinates 17.3 degrees north, 61.7 degrees east, approximately 180 miles southwest of Masira Island, Oman. Surface temperature dropped 15 degrees Celsius in less than 6 hours. No storm activity, no upwelling patterns that would explain it, no seasonal variation. Just a sudden, localized temperature anomaly that formed overnight and has remained stable since. I studied the image. Cold spots in the ocean weren't unusual, but the perfectly circular boundary was troubling. Could be a deep current bringing up cold water, maybe volcanic activity cooling the surface layers. That was our initial hypothesis. She swiped to the next image, this one showing gravitational field measurements from the Grace satellite system. The deep purple depression marked the same coordinates, the color gradient indicating significant deviation from normal. But this changed our assessment. There's a measurable gravitational distortion at these coordinates. Something is pulling downward with enough force to affect satellite telemetry from orbit. I leaned closer. The distortion was significant, beyond anything I'd seen from underwater landslides or tectonic shifts. What could cause that kind of anomaly? We don't know, but it gets worse. She pulled up bathymetric data, sonar scans of the ocean floor. According to every map we have, the seafloor at these coordinates should be at approximately 930 feet, standard depth for this region of the Arabian Sea. But when we tasked a research vessel to conduct detailed sonar mapping 3 days ago, we got something impossible. The sonar image showed a normal seafloor topology, and then, in the center of the cold zone, nothing. Just empty space where the ocean floor should be. The depth readings descended past 2,000 feet, 3,000, 4,000, with no return signal indicating solid ground. Equipment malfunction? I suggested, though my voice lacked conviction. 3 separate sonar systems, Ethan. 2 from our vessel, 1 from a French oceanographic survey ship that happened to be in the region. All 3 confirmed the same thing. The seafloor has dropped away, or was never there to begin with, and we can't determine how deep it actually goes because our equipment can't reach the bottom. She overlaid the coordinates on an ancient map, one I recognized immediately. It was a reconstruction of the world as described in the Book of Enoch, complete with notations in Aramaic and Hebrew indicating the locations of significant events from the text. The cold zone coordinates aligned almost perfectly with a notation that read, in ancient Hebrew, "Here the deep opens, here the watchers were cast down." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Rebecca, the Book of Enoch, is apocryphal. It's not even in the biblical canon. Most scholars consider it religious fiction, mythology, designed to explain the origins of evil. I'm aware of the scholarly consensus, Ethan. I'm also aware that the Ethiopic Orthodox Church considers it canonical scripture, that fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that early church fathers like Tertullian and Origen quoted it as authoritative. But more importantly, I'm aware that we have a physical anomaly at the exact coordinates described in a 2,000-year-old text, and I need to know what we're dealing with. She pulled up another document, this one a personnel file. 12 days ago, the Royal Geographic Society dispatched the HMS Aldridge to investigate the anomaly. It's a research vessel, crew of 23, equipped with state-of-the-art deep-sea exploration equipment. They reached the coordinates 9 days ago and began preliminary surveys. She paused, and I could see her choosing her next words carefully. They stopped transmitting 7 days ago. Complete communications blackout. Their last message was a routine check-in, nothing indicating distress or equipment problems. Then, silence. The British government sent a surveillance aircraft yesterday. The ship is still there, floating in the centre of the cold zone, but no one responded to radio hails. Could be a communications failure, I said, though I was already seeing where this was going. The Japanese thought the same thing. The Nippon Foundation for Deep-Sea Research sent the Akatsuki Maru 3 days after the British vessel. They reached the coordinates 8 days ago. She pulled up another file. They went silent 6 days ago. Same pattern, routine communications, then nothing. 2 separate research vessels, different nations, both vanished while investigating the same coordinates. The room felt colder. What do you want me to do? Lead an expedition. You have 10 days to assemble a team and prepare. We've chartered a research vessel, the Covenant Explorer, and secured access to the latest deep-sea exploration technology. I want you to investigate this anomaly, determine what happened to those crews, and find out what we're actually dealing with. And if it's just a natural phenomenon, underwater cavern, unusual tectonic formation, something perfectly explainable, then we document it, publish our findings, and move on to the next mystery. She met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her expression. Fear. But Ethan, I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've investigated hundreds of claims, debunked dozens of supposed miracles, and I've never encountered anything that genuinely challenged my understanding of natural law. This feels different. The precision of the circular boundary, the gravitational distortion, the missing seafloor, and the fact that 2 research teams vanished investigating it. I think we're looking at something significant, and I need someone I trust to find out what. Over the next 10 days, I assembled my team, pulling from the Institute's roster of specialists and reaching out to colleagues whose expertise matched our needs. Rebecca would accompany us as mission director and primary data analyst. Her expertise in oceanography and her authority within the Institute made her presence non-negotiable. Liam O'Sullivan came recommended through a former colleague at MIT. He was 43, a deep-sea engineer, who'd spent 12 years with the Navy's Deep Submergence Unit before going private. He'd piloted submersibles to depths most people couldn't imagine, including 3 trips to the Mariana Trench. He was quiet, competent, and had the kind of calm demeanour you wanted in someone responsible for keeping you alive 6 miles underwater. He spoke with a faint Irish accent that became more pronounced when he was concentrating, a quirk I'd later come to recognise as a sign he was genuinely concerned about something. Father Isaiah Costas was perhaps our most unusual team member, but his expertise was invaluable. He was a Greek Orthodox priest in his early 60s, originally from Thessaloniki, with a doctorate in ancient languages from Oxford and a specialisation in apocryphal and pseudepigraphal texts. He'd spent 30 years studying the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and other intertestamental literature that most biblical scholars dismissed as interesting but non-authoritative. He had a gentle demeanour, a philosopher's careful way of speaking, an unsettling depth of knowledge about pre-Christian Jewish mysticism. He also happened to be fluent in Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, Coptic, and Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopic language in which the most complete version of Enoch had been preserved. Dr. Priya Kandel handled our geophysical analysis. She was 36, originally from Nepal, with a PhD in seismology from Caltech and a decade of experience studying underwater tectonic activity. She'd been part of the team that mapped the Java Trench in unprecedented detail and had published groundbreaking work on deep ocean earthquake mechanics. She was brilliant, direct to the point of bluntness, and had exactly zero patience for speculation, unsupported by data. If anyone could find a natural explanation for the anomaly, it was Priya. Nathan Torres rounded out our team as equipment specialist and security consultant. 41 years old, former Army Ranger with 2 tours in Afghanistan and specialized training in hostile environment operations. After leaving the military, he'd worked private security for research teams operating in dangerous regions. He was there to manage our equipment, coordinate logistics, and handle any security situations that might arise. He was built like someone who took fitness seriously, had a dry sense of humor, and treated every situation with professional calm that I found reassuring. We departed from Muscat, Oman, on a Monday morning under clear skies. The Covenant Explorer was a converted oceanographic research vessel, 160 feet long, equipped with the latest deep-sea exploration technology, including a submersible rated for depths up to 12,000 feet. The crew was professional, experienced in scientific expeditions, and had been thoroughly vetted by the Institute's security team. The journey to the coordinates would take approximately 3 days at cruising speed, giving us time to review our mission parameters, test equipment, and prepare for whatever we might find. The first day at sea was routine enough. The crew was friendly, the weather fair, and the ship ran smoothly. We spent most of the day reviewing satellite data, discussing approach strategies, and running equipment checks. Father Costas gave an informal briefing on the Book of Enoch that evening in the ship's small conference room, providing context for what the ancient text actually said about the Watchers and their imprisonment. The Book of Enoch was written sometime between 300 BCE and 100 CE, he began, pulling up a timeline on his laptop. It's actually a compilation of several distinct texts written over centuries, but the section relevant to our mission is called the Book of the Watchers, generally dated to the 3rd century BCE. It expands on a cryptic passage from Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, which mentions that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, took wives from among them, and produced the Nephilim, the giants. He pulled up the original Hebrew text. The passage is strange, fragmentary, and most biblical scholars treat it as mythology borrowed from earlier Near Eastern traditions. But Enoch tells the complete story. According to the text, 200 angels called Watchers, whose job was to watch over and guide humanity, descended to earth at Mount Hermon in northern Israel. This isn't metaphorical. The text is geographically specific. Mount Hermon is a real mountain, over 9,000 feet tall, straddling the border between modern Syria and Lebanon. Father Costas showed us photographs of Mount Hermon, snow-capped peaks, rising above the landscape. The text says the Watchers gathered at the summit and swore an oath together, binding themselves by a mutual curse to follow through with their plan to take human wives. That's why the mountain is called Hermon, from the Hebrew word herem, meaning sacred pledge or oath. They knew they were rebelling against heaven, and they bound themselves together so none could back out. What happened after they descended? Priya asked. They took human wives and produced offspring called the Nephilim. The text describes these beings as giants, some versions saying they were 300 cubits tall, roughly 450 feet, though most scholars think that's hyperbole. The Nephilim were violent, consumed vast amounts of food, and when that ran out, they turned to cannibalism, eating both humans and each other. Meanwhile, the Watchers taught humanity forbidden knowledge. He pulled up a list. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, essentially the technology of warfare. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cutting, essentially sorcery, and pharmacology. Amoros taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakel taught astrology. Kawabel taught the signs of the earth. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. The list goes on. The point is that they accelerated human technological and intellectual development far beyond what should have been natural, corrupting humanity with knowledge we weren't ready to use responsibly. And their punishment? I asked. When God saw what had happened, how the Watchers had corrupted humanity, and how the Nephilim were destroying the earth, he sent the archangels to deal with them. Gabriel was commanded to incite the Nephilim against each other, to make them destroy themselves in war. Raphael was sent to bind the leader, Azazel, hand and foot, cast him into a wilderness place called Dudael, cover him with rough and jagged rocks, and leave him in darkness until the day of judgment when he would be cast into fire. Michael was commanded to bind Semyaza and the other Watchers in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations until they would be led away to the abyss of fire for eternal imprisonment. He paused, letting that sink in. The text is very specific about the geography of their imprisonment. They were bound in valleys, beneath the earth, in places associated with deep waters. Enoch describes visiting these prison sites during a mystical journey where angels showed him the structure of creation. In chapter 18, he describes seeing a place that had no firmament of heaven above and no firmly founded earth beneath, a waste and horrible place where 7 stars, representing the 7 chief Watchers, were bound like great burning mountains. He was told this place was the end of heaven and earth, a prison for the stars and the host of heaven. You think the anomaly we're investigating is one of these prison sites? Nathan said. It wasn't a question. I think the coordinates align too precisely to be coincidence, Father Costas replied carefully. Ancient Hebrew cosmology conceived of the universe in layers. Heaven above, earth in the middle, the waters of the deep beneath the earth, and below that, the Tehom, the primordial abyss. The same word used in Genesis 1, verse 2 to describe the deep, over which the Spirit of God hovered before creation began. Most scholars interpret this as mythology, but what if it was geography? What if the abyss is an actual location? A place where the normal structure of reality is different, where the barriers between dimensions are thinner. That's a hell of a leap from ancient cosmology to modern physics, Priya said skeptically. Perhaps, but consider this, we have a measurable gravitational anomaly at coordinates that match an ancient text description of a prison for rebellious angels. We have a missing seafloor, as if the earth beneath the waters has dropped away into nothing. We have 2 research vessels that went silent after investigating the site. I'm not saying the ancient text is literally accurate in every detail, but I'm saying that something is there. Something that ancient people tried to describe with the conceptual framework they had available. The second day at sea, things started to go wrong. It began with small equipment malfunctions. The GPS system would show our coordinates accurately one moment, then drift randomly the next, showing us miles off course before snapping back to the correct position. The ship's compass became unreliable, the needle spinning lazily, rather than pointing true north. We'd calibrate it, and within an hour, it would drift again. The radio communications with the mainland became intermittent. We'd be talking to the Institute's operations center in clear audio. Then, the signal would dissolve into static. But it wasn't just static. If you listen carefully, there seemed to be patterns in the noise, almost like voices whispering beneath the white noise. Our communications officer, a veteran sailor named Rodriguez, spent hours trying to filter out the interference without success. It's like there's something broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously, he said, frustration evident in his voice. But there's no source. It's just ambient noise that shouldn't be there. The crew started to change. Sailors who'd been friendly and talkative the first day became withdrawn, nervous. Conversations at meals grew quieter, more strained. I noticed several crew members crossing themselves when they thought no one was watching, and the ship's small chapel, usually empty except for Sunday services, had people in it at all hours. Liam spent most of the second day running diagnostics on our submersible, the Covenant Descent. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, a titanium-hulled deep-sea vehicle designed for depths up to 12,000 feet. It could accommodate 4 people, had redundant life support systems, high-intensity LED lights, robotic arms for sample collection, and enough battery power for 72 hours of operation. He found nothing wrong with it, but he kept checking anyway, running through his pre-flight checklist with the kind of obsessive thoroughness that suggested he was more worried than he was letting on. Father Costas spent most of his time in the ship's small library, surrounded by printouts of ancient manuscripts. I found him there the second evening, hunched over his laptop with a dozen reference books spread across the table. "Tell me more about the Watchers," I said, sitting down across from him. "The specific details. What exactly did they do that was so terrible it required eternal imprisonment?" He looked up, his dark eyes troubled behind his reading glasses. The surface reading is that they taught forbidden knowledge and produced the Nephilim, but there's a deeper layer to it. According to Enoch, the Watchers didn't just teach humanity random facts. They revealed secrets that were supposed to remain hidden until humanity was ready for them. They gave us fire before we understood its dangers, medicine before we understood biology, weapons before we understood peace, astrology before we understood our place in the cosmos. Knowledge itself was the sin. Knowledge without wisdom, yes. Knowledge without the moral and spiritual development to use it responsibly. Think about it in modern terms. Imagine giving nuclear weapons technology to Bronze Age civilizations. The knowledge itself isn't evil, but humanity wasn't ready for it. The Watchers accelerated our development in ways that corrupted our natural evolution. They created a civilization so advanced and so violent that God chose to cleanse the world with the flood rather than let it continue. But the flood didn't destroy the Watchers. No, they were imprisoned before the flood, bound in darkness beneath the earth to await final judgment. The Nephilim were destroyed when the waters came, but the Watchers themselves remained in their prisons. According to the text, they'll stay there for 70 generations, and then they'll be led to the abyss of fire for eternal torment. How long is 70 generations? Depends on how you calculate it. If you use the ancient standard of 40 years per generation, that's 2,800 years. If you use the genealogies in Genesis as a guide, which sometimes use 100-year generations, it could be 7,000 years. The point is, the imprisonment is temporary. They're not being held there forever. They're being held until an appointed time, and then they'll be moved to their final destination. What appointed time? Father Costas closed his laptop slowly. The text doesn't specify. It uses phrases like, "until the day of judgment," and "when the stars align wrong." That's always been interpreted as referring to the end times, the final judgment described in Revelation. But Ethan, what if it's not metaphorical? What if there's an actual moment in time when these prisons are supposed to open? What if that's what we're witnessing? Before I could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Cross, Dr. Ashford requests your presence on the bridge immediately." I found Rebecca standing at the navigation station, staring at the radar screen with Liam beside her. Her face was pale. "We're 20 miles from the anomaly zone," she said without preamble, "and we're picking up something on radar." The screen showed 2 contacts stationary, right at the edge of the cold zone coordinates. "Ships?" I asked. "That's what we thought initially. But they're not moving at all. Perfect dead stop, no drift, no engine signature. And they're at the exact coordinates where the Aldridge and the Akatsuki Maru should be." We found them the next day at 2:47 in the afternoon, exactly where the radar had indicated. 2 research vessels floating in water so still it looked like glass. The transition from normal ocean to the anomaly zone was sharp enough to see. We crossed an invisible boundary, and suddenly the waves just stopped. The ocean became perfectly calm, mirror smooth, stretching in a circle approximately 6 miles in diameter. Beyond the edge of the circle, we could see normal waves and currents, but inside the boundary, the water was dead. The sky above us turned grey, not cloudy, just grey, like someone had desaturated the colour. The sun was still visible, but it looked dimmer, more distant. The temperature dropped noticeably, and I could see my breath when I exhaled. "This is impossible," Liam said quietly, staring at the boundary behind us where normal ocean ended and dead calm began. "Water doesn't behave like this. Currents, wind, thermal variation, tidal forces, they all create movement. You can't have a perfect circle of calm unless something is actively suppressing wave formation, and I don't know of any natural force that could do that." Priya was frantically taking readings. "The ocean floor is wrong. According to my bathymetric sonar, we should be at about 930 feet here, but I'm getting return signals that suggest depths over 5,000 feet, and in some areas, no return at all. The sonar just keeps reading deeper, with no seafloor detected." The abandoned ships floated like ghosts 200 yards ahead of us. The HMS Aldridge was a modern research vessel, sleek and well-maintained, British flag hanging limp in the still air. The Akatsuki Maru was slightly smaller, a Japanese oceanographic survey ship. Both appeared structurally intact, no visible damage, no signs of fire or collision. They just sat there in the dead water, empty and silent. "Nathan, Liam, suit up," Rebecca ordered. "We're boarding the Aldridge. I want to know what happened to that crew." They took an inflatable boat across the still water, weapons drawn, though none of us could articulate what threat we expected. I watched through binoculars as they climbed aboard the British vessel, disappearing into the superstructure. They were gone for 37 minutes. When they returned, both men looked shaken in a way that combat veterans shouldn't be shaken. "No one aboard," Nathan reported, his voice carefully controlled. "But everything's been left behind. Personal effects, laptops, research equipment, food in the galley, coffee cups on tables in the mess hall. It's like the entire crew just vanished in the middle of whatever they were doing. No signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of violence or panic. They just aren't there anymore." "Found this in the captain's quarters," Liam said, holding up a leather-bound logbook. "Captain Richard Pemberton's personal log. Last entry is dated 7 days ago." He opened it to show us. The handwriting deteriorated across the pages from neat professional script to desperate scrawl that looked like it had been written by someone whose hands were shaking violently. The entries painted a horrifying picture. The Aldridge had arrived at the coordinates 9 days earlier and immediately detected the shaft. A perfectly circular opening in the seafloor, approximately 400 feet in diameter. Captain Pemberton had been cautious, wanting to conduct thorough surface surveys before attempting any deep-sea investigation. But the mission's chief scientist, Dr. Leonard Chen, insisted on immediate exploration. Against the captain's recommendation, Chen and 3 other crew members had descended in the ship's submersible. They'd reported finding symbols on the walls of the shaft, writing in an unknown language. They descended to over 3,000 feet, transmitting increasingly excited reports about what they were seeing. Then, their communications became erratic, filled with static and strange audio artifacts. When the submersible returned, Chen was unconscious. The other 3 crew members were unresponsive, staring at nothing, their pupils dilated. The ship's medical officer examined them and found no physical injuries, no signs of decompression sickness or equipment malfunction. Chen died 3 hours later. The medical officer listed the cause as cardiac arrest, but noted that Chen's heart had been perfectly healthy in his last physical examination 2 weeks earlier. The other 3 crew members locked themselves in their quarters. The captain could hear them through the doors, whispering to each other, but they weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking any language the captain recognized, and according to the personnel files, none of them spoke anything but English and basic conversational French. The next entry was written in handwriting that barely resembled the earlier script. November 24th, 8:47 a.m. The 3 who went down are gone. The doors to their quarters were locked from the inside, but when we broke them open this morning, the cabins were empty. No one saw them leave. No one heard anything. We've searched the entire ship. They're simply not here anymore. But we see them in the water. All of us have seen them. Shapes moving beneath the surface, keeping pace with the ship. They're not whales or fish. They're something else, something that shouldn't exist. Dr. Patel thinks we're experiencing mass hallucination, shared psychosis brought on by stress and the strange environment. But I've been at sea for 23 years. I know the difference between seeing something and imagining it. They're watching us from below, and they're rising. The final entries became increasingly incoherent, the handwriting degenerating into scrawl that was barely legible. November 24th, 11:32 p.m. Most of the crew has abandoned ship. They took both life rafts and the remaining inflatable. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen. They said staying on the ship was suicide, that we needed to get out of the dead zone before it was too late. I can't abandon the Aldridge. I'm the captain. This is my ship. I'm alone now. I can hear them moving in the water below me. I can feel them watching. We shouldn't have come here. This place isn't meant for human eyes. The symbols in the shaft were a warning, not an invitation. Dr. Chen read them wrong. He thought they were describing knowledge, secrets waiting to be uncovered. But Father O'Brien, our chaplain, who went down in the first lifeboat, said they were something else. A seal, a binding, a lock on a door that was never meant to be opened. God forgive us. We were wrong to come here. The final entry was a single word, written so forcefully, the pen had torn through the paper, descending. Below it, in what looked like a different hand entirely, more symbols. The same style of writing we'd seen in the photographs Chen's team had transmitted from inside the shaft, before their communications cut out. Father Costas examined the symbols carefully, photographing them from multiple angles. This is Proto-Semitic script, pre-cuneiform, similar to what we see in very early Akkadian texts, but older, much older. I can't read it fluently, but I recognize some of the characters. This symbol here means bound or imprisoned. This one is similar to the Hebrew word for watcher or guardian, and this sequence appears to be a name, Azazel, I think. We spent the rest of that day photographing evidence from both ships, documenting everything we found. The Japanese vessel told a similar story, though the final log entries were in Japanese that Priya translated for us. Same pattern, descent into the shaft, crew members returning changed, deaths from no apparent cause, people vanishing from locked rooms, and finally abandonment by the surviving crew. That evening, we convened in the Covenant Explorers conference room to discuss our next steps. The debate lasted for hours. Nathan argued we should abort the mission immediately. 2 complete research teams vanished or died investigating this thing. We have clear evidence that descending into that shaft produces catastrophic psychological and physiological effects. The smart play is to return to port, report our findings, and let someone with military resources handle it. And tell them what? Rebecca countered. That we found weird weather and some abandoned ships. That won't get military intervention. It'll get a meteorology team and a Coast Guard investigation. Whatever is happening here, it's beyond normal science. We need to understand it before we can explain it to anyone who might be able to help. We came here to investigate an anomaly, Priya said. We found an anomaly, a significant one. The missing seafloor alone is worth extensive study, but I agree with Nathan that the human cost might be too high. If descending into that shaft causes the effects we've seen, we shouldn't risk it. Liam had been quiet throughout the discussion. Finally, he spoke up. I've done hundreds of deep-sea dives in my career. I've been to the Mariana Trench 3 times. I know what equipment failure looks like, what decompression sickness does to people, what psychological stress does to crews in confined spaces. What happened to those teams doesn't match any of that. Whatever affected them came from exposure to something down there. But here's the thing, they went down unprepared. They had no idea what they were looking for. We do. We have context they didn't have. We know about the Book of Enoch, about the supposed prison for the Watchers. If we're careful, if we're prepared for psychological effects, we might be able to learn something without suffering their fate. Father Costas had been praying quietly in Greek throughout the discussion. Now he looked up, his expression grave but determined. Enoch saw this place, he said quietly. According to the text, he was taken by angels on a mystical journey to witness the structure of creation, including the prisons where the rebellious Watchers were bound. In chapter 18, verses 12 through 16, he describes it specifically. Let me read it to you. He pulled up the text on his tablet, Gear A's original, alongside an English translation. And beyond that abyss, I saw a place which had no firmament of the heaven above, and no firmly founded earth beneath it. There was no water upon it, and no birds, but it was a waste and horrible place. I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains, and to me, when I inquired regarding them, the angel said, "This place is the end of heaven and earth. This has become a prison for the stars and the host of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times. And he was wroth with them and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated, even for 10,000 years." He looked around the table. A place with no firmament above and no firm earth beneath. A void. A waste and horrible place. That's what we're seeing here. The missing seafloor, the gravitational anomaly, the dead zone, where normal physical laws seem suspended. If this is the place Enoch described, then we're looking at something that predates human civilization by millennia. Something that was deliberately sealed away and hidden. The question isn't whether we should investigate. The question is whether we can afford not to. If this seal is weakening, if whatever is imprisoned here is starting to break free, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Rebecca made the final call. We descend. Tomorrow morning, first light. Ethan, me, Liam, and Father Costas. 4-person crew. We investigate the shaft, collect photographic evidence and samples, and return. Total dive time not to exceed 6 hours. Priya and Nathan monitor from the surface, maintain constant communication, and initiate emergency extraction protocols if we don't surface on schedule. None of us slept well that night. I lay in my bunk, listening to the silence. The normal ocean sounds were absent. No waves against the hull, no creaking of the ship, just dead quiet that felt oppressive, suffocating. At 6:45 the next morning, we suited up and entered the Covenant descent. The submersible was cramped with 4 people, but it felt reassuring to have solid titanium walls between us and whatever waited below. Liam ran through his pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, testing every system twice. Father Costas clutched a small leather-bound prayer book, his lips moving silently. Rebecca was already taking notes, documenting every step of the process. I checked my camera equipment, making sure I had enough memory cards and backup batteries. "Seal check complete," Liam announced. "Life support systems nominal. Battery at full charge. We're ready for descent." The crane lowered us into the water at 7:03 a.m. The submersible settled into the ocean with barely a ripple. The dead calm water accepted us without resistance. "Beginning descent," Liam said, his voice taking on the calm professional tone of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. "Descent, rate 200 feet per minute. Current depth 30 feet and descending." The water around us was that same impossible clarity we'd seen from the surface. Visibility extended in all directions, far beyond what should be possible. The morning sunlight penetrated deeper than natural physics allowed, creating an eerie twilight that made the ocean feel like a vast, empty cathedral. At 500 feet, we encountered the first fish. They were swimming in circles, dozens of them, moving in a perfect spiral around our descent path. Not avoiding us, not fleeing, just circling endlessly in formation like they were trapped in some invisible current. "That's unusual behavior," Rebecca noted, filming them through the port. "That's impossible behavior," Priya's voice came through the comm system. "Those are different species. Tuna, mackerel, a few sharks. They don't school together, and they don't maintain that kind of precise formation naturally." At 1,000 feet, the fish were gone. We descended through water so clear it looked like air, like we were falling through empty space rather than ocean. At 1,500 feet, our lights illuminated the shaft. It opened beneath us like the throat of some immense creature, perfectly circular, approximately 400 feet in diameter, just as the British crew had reported. They hadn't adequately described what it looked like. The walls were smooth as polished glass, descending into darkness beyond the reach of our lights, and they were covered, every inch of them, in symbols. The script spiraled downward in continuous bands, like the threads of a massive screw. The characters were intricate, beautiful, in an alien way, and they seemed to shimmer slightly in our lights as if they weren't quite three-dimensional. "My God," Father Costas breathed, pressing his face close to the viewing port. "Can you read it?" I asked. "I can recognize individual characters, but the grammar is unlike anything I've studied. This is Proto-Semitic script, but it predates any known examples by centuries, possibly millennia. Give me a moment." Liam maneuvered us closer to the wall, bringing us within 10 feet of the surface. I could see now why the symbols seemed to shimmer. They weren't carved into the stone. They were part of the stone itself, as if the molecular structure of the rock had been altered to form writing. There were no tool marks, no evidence of chiseling or engraving. The symbols existed as naturally as the rock's crystalline structure. "This section here," Father Costas said, photographing frantically. "I can make out some of it. Here lie the watchers who left their station. This word means bound or imprisoned. And this phrase, sealed by the voice of the Most High until the appointed time. This is a warning, or perhaps a declaration, telling anyone who finds this place what it contains." "We're entering the shaft," Liam announced. "Depth 1,600 feet and descending. Everyone stay calm and report any unusual sensations immediately." The descent through the shaft felt like falling into another world. The walls rose around us, covered in their spiral of ancient script. Father Costas continued translating what he could, his voice becoming increasingly strained. "The 7 who fell, the 200 who followed, bound in darkness until the stars align wrong. When the seals break, they rise. When they rise, judgment comes. The knowledge they brought corrupted the first age. The children they sired consumed the earth. They taught war to the peaceful, sorcery to the innocent, lust to the pure. They will do so again if they escape. Depth 3,000 feet, Liam reported. Pressure readings are anomalous. We should be experiencing approximately 1,300 psi at this depth, but the gauge reads only 400 psi. Either the instrument is malfunctioning, or the pressure environment is inconsistent with depth. Check the backup system.